Chapter 2641. As they spoke, they moved in the direction of Luo Qingtong's group and surrounded Chu Yuqing's group. F***CK, your grandpa, Chu Qiankong, and Chu Yuanhong. Chu Yuqing had already been enraged by the Lin family's actions. When he saw Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong's first and second elders turn to Luo Qingtong's group and curse him, he was so angry that his brain was about to explode. Weren't these guys just waiting for Chu Lingfeng to die? Now that they saw the Lin family's people make a move, they knew there was no chance of success, so they immediately changed sides. This bunch of bastards. Chu Yuqing cursed inwardly as he vomited blood. Fortunately, he hadn't been the only one to make a move. Chu Hanyu and the others have been involved as well. Otherwise, wouldn't Chu Qiankong and Chu Yuanhong have tied him up and brought him to Luo Xiaoqi to beg for forgiveness? Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing felt even more nauseous. He clenched his teeth and looked at Luo Qingtong. He knew that he couldn't do anything to Luo Qingtong this time, let alone Chu Lingfeng. Fortunately, that bitch Luo Xiaoqi still didn't dare to openly offend the Tianfeng Chu family. For now, he'd just admit defeat. Once it was time to fight for the heavenly grass, he'd think of a way to make a move against them. As Chu Yuqing thought of this, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He forced a smile and looked at Luo Qingtong. He said coldly, "This time, it was indeed us who didn't think things through. Young master's matter will naturally be handled by the family's elders. Since you all think we've overstepped our boundaries, we'll withdraw." After saying this, he immediately ordered his men to put away their weapons and disperse the encirclement. But as soon as he finished speaking, Luo Qingtong's indifferent voice rang out. "Young Master Yuqing, is this the end?" Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She raised an eyebrow at Chu Yuqing. He didn't think she'd let him off so easily, did he? He could avoid the death penalty, but he couldn't escape punishment. Luo Qingtong wasn't prepared to let Chu Lingfeng lay his hands on Chu Yuqing and the others. But who said she was going to let Chu Yuqing off so easily? Especially when the other party looked as if he didn't dare to do anything to him. He didn't know where his confidence came from. "What else do you want?" "Umph," Chu Yuqing sneered. He was certain that Luo Qingtong was bluffing. If she dared to do anything to them, she wouldn't have stopped Chu Lingfeng from taking action just now. He still wanted to scare him now. Did he really think that he was a 3-year-old child who could be easily fooled? Reality proved that Chu Yuqing was wrong. In that case, young Master Yuqing isn't going to apologize for slandering me. This is going to be difficult. Luo Qingtong raised an eyebrow. She looked at Chu Yuqing. "Although I'm not the type to hold grudges, I'm a rather open-minded person. But I'm a man. I can't take it when others call me a calamity." She hadn't even been called that when she was by Yi Qianqian's side, but when she was by Chu Lingfeng's side, she was called a calamity. Even if the uncle could endure it, even if the aunt could endure it, this big sister couldn't. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly at Chu Yuqing. "Young Master Yuqing, do you want me to have the young master personally demand justice from you? Or do you want to do it yourself?" As soon as Luo Qingtong spoke, Chu Yuqing's expression froze. "You dare," he shouted, trying to put on a brave front. She wanted Chu Lingfeng to demand justice. She clearly wanted his life. Chu Yuqing suddenly realized that Luo Qingtong didn't have to deal with Chu Qiankong and the others. She didn't have to deal with Chu Hanyu and the others. Chapter 2642. Damn it, this slut. She must have deliberately prevented Chu Lingfeng from making a move just now. In this way, his side strength was divided. As long as she showed that she only wanted to deal with him, the others wouldn't care at all. Sure enough, when he looked at Chu Hanyu and the others, he saw that their faces were full of indifference. Chu Hanyu and the others were vexed. If they had known that they wouldn't be able to hurt Chu Lingfeng this time, they wouldn't have joined forces with Chu Yucheng and the others. Now, they were riding a tiger and couldn't get off. At this moment, seeing that Luo Qingtong was only going to deal with Chu Yucheng, why would they bother with him? They wished that Luo Qingtong would only deal with Chu Yucheng so that this matter could be wiped clean. After all, They hadn't officially made a move against Chu Lingfeng. When they returned to their families in the future, it would be easier to explain. But Chu Lingfeng's side would definitely have a grudge against them. With this thought in mind, how could they have the time to care about Chu Yucheng? When the latter saw this scene, he suddenly felt a burst of fear and trepidation. Luo Xiaoqi, this slut, really wanted to use this opportunity to kill him, just like how he had wanted to use her name to kill Chu Lingfeng. When Chu Yucheng thought of this, the muscles on his face suddenly twitched fiercely. Seeing that Luo Qingtong was about to call Chu Lingfeng to make a move, he immediately shouted, "Wait." Speaking up to this point, he said with great humiliation, "I apologize." Chu Yucheng almost bit his cheeks as he said this sentence. To have him bow his head to a mercenary, and a man that Chu Lingfeng had taken a fancy to, was extremely humiliating for Chu Yucheng. "Slut, sooner or later, I'll make you die without a burial place." Chu Yucheng thought viciously in his heart, but on the surface, he gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I apologize." "Oh, then how does young Master Yucheng intend to apologize?" Luo Qingtong calmly looked at Chu Yucheng as she spoke. She knew what he was thinking when she saw his tough exterior but cowardly heart. However, Luo Qingtong was happy to let him misunderstand, which saved her a lot of tricks. As she spoke, Chu Yucheng's eyes widened. "What do you mean by apologize?" He barked harshly. He had already apologized to her. This be *TCH. What else did he want? Chu Yucheng's face was filled with rage. Luo Qingtong looked at him leisurely and said, "Young Master Yucheng, this is strange. You want to kill me because I'm a troublemaker. You don't think that this matter will be settled with just a few words of apology, right? If that's the case, that's fine too. I'll get young Lord Chu to teach you a lesson. I'll apologize to you after this. How about it?" Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a faint smile. Chu Yucheng, on the other hand, was already on the verge of roaring out. Not much. The veins on his forehead twitched fiercely. How could he not know that Luo Qingtong's words were a threat? If he really let that idiot Chu Lingfeng take action, then the other party can only wait to apologize to a corpse. This slut. Chu Yucheng's heart was filled with hatred. But no matter how much he hated her, there was nothing he could do. In this situation, no one in the Chu family was on his side, and Luo Qingtong had a good reason to deal with him. He simply couldn't refuse. At this time, Chu Yucheng finally understood how Luo Qingtong felt when she was threatened with the label of a troublemaker. Luo Xiaoqi, this slut, she did it on purpose. Chapter 26:43. I'll slap myself 10 times as an apology. Chu Yucheng clenched his teeth so hard they were about to bleed. But just as he spoke, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. "Not enough, Luo Xiaoqi." Chu Yucheng roared. "Don't go too far. With your cheap life, if it weren't for that idiot Chu Lingfeng, who do you think you are? It's already good enough that I'm willing to apologize to you. You actually dare to be so picky." When she heard Chu Yucheng's words, a bloody light flashed across Luo Qingtong's eyes, carrying a cold and bloodthirsty aura. Suppressing the blood in her eyes, Luo Qingtong looked at the roaring and furious Chu Yucheng in front of her. Her lips curled into a devilishly charming smile. The birthmark on her face was sinister and ugly, but as her smile blossomed, a kind of seductive charm that even dirt couldn't conceal seeped out. But very quickly, this feeling disappeared without a trace, as if it was just a hallucination. "Young Master Yucheng, you're right." Luo Qingtong smiled as she looked at Chu Yucheng. She raised a hand to stop Chu Lingfeng, whose eyes were red with anger and was about to rush out. She nodded at Chu Yucheng and said, "I'm nothing, but you, young Master Yucheng, are something. But no matter how much you're something, shouldn't you apologize to me now?" Luo Qingtong spoke slowly. Since Chu Yucheng didn't want face, then she wouldn't give him any. "I'll say it right here today. Young Master Yucheng, you can either apologize until I'm satisfied. Otherwise, I'll have young Master Chu teach you what it means to apologize. You should know that I'm looking forward to it. After all, my cheap life is nothing, don't you think? But young Master Yuching, your life is precious. No matter how you look at it, don't lose out. Moreover, with young Master Chu around, I might not be in danger. At this point, Luo Qingtong smiled at Chu Yuching, her lips parting slightly. Chu Yuching could clearly see that it was the word thank you. This be asterisk TCH. She's deliberately provoking me. That's right. She didn't want him to apologize at all. She just wanted to provoke him so that Chu Lingfeng would attack him. Damn it. How could he forget about this? As Chu Yuching thought this, his heart trembled. He was so angry just now that he had forgotten about this. This bastard Luo Shaoqi is really cunning. Chu Yuching gritted his teeth. He had almost fallen for Luo Qingtong's trap. Was this be asterisk TCH waiting for him to not apologize in anger? He would not let her have her way. 20. He shouted sternly. 20 slaps. 100. Luo Qingtong's expression was indifferent. She looked at Chu Lingfeng coldly and said, I also want to clarify that you have wronged me. You. Chu Yuching was furious, but when he thought about how Luo Qingtong was deliberately provoking him, he immediately suppressed his anger. He would endure it for now. In the future, he would definitely make her die without a burial place. Chu Yuching roared in his heart, but on the surface he swallowed his anger and said, 50. I can't go any higher. 200. Luo Qingtong's voice was cold. She held her head high and looked at Chu Yuching, acting like a petty person who had achieved her goal. Her arrogant appearance was so vivid that it could drive a person to death. Young Master Yuching, if you continue to blabber, I reckon that you won't be able to stop even if the heart of the continent opens. Are you sure you're sincere? Chapter 26:44. Luo Qingtong's words were full of arrogance. She used Chu Lingfeng to threaten Chu Yuching at every turn, looking as if she couldn't wait to kill him. Chu Yuching was so angry that he trembled and saw stars. He was now completely certain that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead, so she didn't want him to apologize. She was deliberately making things difficult for him. As he thought about it, he gritted his teeth and agreed to Luo Qingtong's request. All right, 200 then. This slut has nothing to say now, right? Oh, I forgot to tell young Master Yuching. 200 was the price just now. Now it's 300. Who told young Master Yuching to answer so slowly? Don't you think so? Luo Qingtong smiled sweetly at Chu Yuching, almost causing him to vomit blood in anger. The more difficult Luo Qingtong was to make things difficult for him, the more certain Chu Yuching was that Luo Qingtong wanted him dead. He held his breath and didn't even reply to Luo Qingtong. He only said fiercely, All right, 300 then. Then, young Master Yuching, you may begin. Luo Qingtong smiled. Remember, don't use too little strength. Otherwise, I don't mind having young Master Chu do it for me. As soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, Chu Yuching's eyes twitched fiercely. Originally, he had already dispersed the power in his palm and was prepared to use his own hand to gently slap Yi Zichen. But as soon as Luo Qingtong said those words, he could only gather all his strength in his palm and ruthlessly slap himself. Pah! Chu Yuching was almost sent flying by his own slap, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this scene, the surrounding people were all dumbstruck. Oh my God, Chu Yuching really did apologize to me. Not only that, he even slapped himself so fiercely. What's going on? Just because Luo Qingtong said she wanted Chu Lingfeng to teach him a lesson. If he was afraid of Chu Lingfeng, he wouldn't have plotted to kill him. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. They had originally thought that Chu Yuching would resolutely refuse to apologize. After all, these top-notch disciples placed great importance on face, and Chu Yuching hated Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng to the bone. He'd rather be taught a lesson by Chu Lingfeng than admit his own mistakes. But what was going on now? Everyone was dumbfounded. Only a small number of people noticed some clues. Master, the evil doctor is really... Feng Yu's lips twitched. She thought to herself that she and the others should stay away from the evil doctor in the future. This scheme of his was really too frightening. If they offended the demonic doctor would play them to death even without their master's help. Chu Jingyi also looked at Luo Qingtong in shock. Oh my god, she couldn't have already planned to make Chu Yuqing so miserable when she stopped the young master, right? Really, Chu Jingyi clutched his cheek, feeling a burst of pain. It was said that killing someone shouldn't be too excessive. If he were Chu Yuqing, he'd rather be killed than be toyed with like this, right? Chu Yuqing had been completely led into a ditch by Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Jingyi believed that if Luo Qingtong had told Chu Yuqing to slap himself 300 times as an apology, and also to state that he had wronged her, Chu Yuqing would never have agreed. But she had gradually led Chu Yuqing into the trap bit by bit. Chu Yuqing hadn't been able to react in time and had fallen into her trap. When Chu Yuqing came back to his senses, he'd probably hate her to the bone. That's not right. He already hates her to the bone. Chapter 2645. While the Tianfeng Chu clan was still in shock, Lian Xingqian was also looking at Luo Qingtong in astonishment. He could clearly see that from beginning to end, the rhythm of the entire scene was in the hands of this seemingly thin and frail youth. The other party's methods were truly impressive. If the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan was half as scheming as her, or rather, if she was willing to help the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan, the position of the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan wouldn't belong to anyone else. Thinking about it this way, the young master of the Tianfeng Chu clan had profited from a disaster. She had encountered an ambush, but had met such a monstrous youth. It was a pity that the Tianfeng Chu clan had met her first. Otherwise, he might have tried to recruit her to the Lian clan. After all, with her scheming and methods, who knew how stunning she would be when her strength grew in the future? Lian Xingqian couldn't help but feel a little regretful. Somewhere not far away, Zhan Beiyue and the others narrowed their eyes as they looked in the direction of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan. Young master, this youth called Luo Xiaoqi is truly impressive. A member of the Zhan clan, standing beside him, said. They were far away, so they didn't know what was going on over there. But looking at the series of actions of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Feixing Lian clan, as well as Chu Yuqing's slapping himself in the mouth, they could still make some guesses. The Zhan clan originally had a deep impression of Luo Qingtong. Previously, when Chu Yuqing had tried to kill Chu Lingfeng, they had seen how easily Luo Qingtong had rescued Chu Lingfeng. Now that they saw her reverse the situation, they were even more surprised. This young man was far more powerful than they had imagined. It's a pity that we have matters to attend to. The middle-aged man sighed again. Luo Qingtong, this kind of intelligent and resourceful youth, was really a good target to recruit, but it was a pity that this was not the right occasion. Zhan Beiyue's face was indifferent, and he didn't say anything. Looking at Luo Qingtong's eyes, there was a faint trace of appreciation. The youth's calmness and intelligence in the face of the murderous intent was indeed very rare. Even though he was in a disadvantageous position, he did not panic in the face of danger. His strength was low, but he was neither servile nor overbearing. On the contrary, he had the strength to counterattack. His every word and action seemed very arrogant and despotic, but in fact, he had always stepped on the other party's bottom line. If Zhan Beiyue was in her position, he probably wouldn't be able to do better than her. It was a pity that they had to conceal their identities in order to obtain the ancient divine item. They would try to recruit this young man when they met him in the future. Keep an eye on the heart of the continent for now. Also, don't alert the people of the Lian family and the Chu family. Pay attention to the people from the demonic moon sect. See if they will make any moves. As soon as Zhan Beiyue's words left his mouth, the faces of the Zhan clan members turned solemn. They hurriedly replied, yes. The whereabouts of the ancient divine item were right in front of them. They had to be extremely careful. The people from the demonic moon sect had eavesdropped on their conversation and already knew about the existence of the ancient divine item. This time, even if they were seriously injured, they wouldn't give up on obtaining information about the ancient divine item. If the other party really saw an opening and obtained the ancient divine item, it would be troublesome. Everyone's faces were grave. in the direction of Luo Qingtong and the others. Slap, 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 slap. Chapter 2646. Boom! A terrifying wave of spiritual energy came from right in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. It was the hole in the ground where the heart of the continent was located. The last bit of power of the great Tao around the heart of the continent had completely erupted. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was as pure as water, and it was full of vitality. It dissipated in an instant. Countless streams of decaying spiritual energy surged in from all directions and rapidly eroded this fertile land. The amount of power of the great Tao that erupted from the heart of the continent was too little for the entire abandoned continent. It couldn't be compared to the decaying spiritual energy in the abandoned continent at all. Now that the last bit of spiritual energy in the heart of the continent had erupted, without the support of the spiritual energy, the decaying spiritual energy immediately began to invade again. The location of the hole in the heart of the continent was completely clear in front of Luo Qingtong and the rest. Without the continuous eruption of power of the great Tao, they could enter this place. Let's go! Lian Xingqian and the rest's eyes lit up when they saw this scene. With a swoosh, they dashed toward the huge hole in the ground. When Luo Qingtong and the rest saw this, they couldn't be bothered with Chu Yuqing, who was slapping himself in the face. With a swoosh, they also dashed toward the huge hole. Boom! Yi Qianxian appeared in front of Luo Qingtong in an instant. Without waiting for Chu Lingfeng to react, he pulled Luo Qingtong into his arms and dashed toward the hole. Bastard! Chu Lingfeng was enraged. He had always harbored great enmity toward Yi Qianxian. This man obviously had ill intentions toward his master. His master belonged to Ming Zun. He chased after Yi Qianxian and the rest. However, with the strength of Yi Qianxian and the others, how could they easily catch up to them? The group maintained a certain distance from Lian Xingqian's group and entered the cave almost at the same time as Lian Xingqian. Only now did everyone realize that the strength of this group of white jade masked men was not inferior to the bodyguards of the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Since when did Heaven's Wind Mercenary City have such a person? Everyone looked at Yi Qianxian and the others in surprise. The latter and the others looked calm and composed. With the white jade masks covering their faces, no one could see their expressions. They only felt that the origins of this group of people were not simple. He was most likely not a member of the Tianfeng Mercenary City. Instead, he was hiding among the mercenaries and had coincidentally encountered the Tianfeng Chu clan issuing a mission, so he came to join in the fun. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian's team was not the only one. Some of the mercenaries from the Flying Star Lian clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan also quietly displayed strength that was different from the rest. When Luo Qingtong and the others were being attacked by Chu Yuqing and the others, there were still some mercenaries who did not side with her. Instead, they chose to watch from where they were. At this moment, within this group of people, there were people whose strength was on par with the guards of the Chu clan of Heavenly Wind. The Flying Star Lian clan situation was similar. A group of mercenaries who had kept a low profile suddenly stood out from the crowd. Chapter 2647. Even though they knew that the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of Flying Star would never let anyone take away the Tianluo grass, they were still willing to take the risk and try. What if they succeeded? Even if they couldn't, they could still try. If they couldn't, they wouldn't lose anything, right? Luo Qingtong looked in shock at Yi Qianmin, who snatched her into his arms. Brother, call me husband. Yi Qianxian's face was indifferent, and his eyes hidden behind the white jade mask were deep. Didn't you say you were praising me? You didn't call me that before. Nonsense. Why did you call me that? The word husband wasn't really a compliment. Luo Qingtong's face was full of pain, and she could not say anything for a long time. She was afraid that she would mislead Yi Qianren and let him call every person he liked hubby. She would definitely go crazy at that time. Therefore, She deliberately avoided calling Yi Qianxian husband in front of him. What's more, she was still a teenager. She still had some doubts about calling Yi Qianxian husband. After all, even if she knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Xiaoqi, she still didn't want to call Yi Qianxian husband as Luo Xiaoqi. She always felt that if she called Yi Qianxian that way when he didn't know anything, he would be taken advantage of. In a way, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were just as possessive. Even if it was her alias, she didn't have the right to take away her man. Luo Qingtong was so unreasonable. Therefore, she coughed softly and immediately changed the topic. Well, young Master Chu, before she finished her words, Yi Qianxian's cold voice sounded. Don't worry about him. He is too troublesome to protect you. You'd better stay by my side obediently. Since I've accepted the protection fees, I'll naturally do my best. When he said that, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. So this is the reason why you snatched me away so openly? What a pain in the ass. Thinking about how Chu Lingfeng did not know Yi Qianren's identity at all and was still on guard against her, fearing that she would fall in love with someone else, Luo Qingtong felt her balls ache. Fortunately, Chu Lingfeng might not have the time to find trouble with Yi Qianxian later. Being by Yi Qianxian's side was indeed safer than being by Chu Lingfeng's side. Most importantly, if she didn't reveal her abilities, it would be easy for people to see her as Chu Lingfeng's weakness if she was by his side. If she was targeted, it would be disadvantageous to Chu Lingfeng. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong didn't refute it. In fact, if it weren't for that blockhead Chu Lingfeng's misunderstanding, she would have been by Yi Qianxian's side right now. Therefore, she didn't say anything else. The group of people flew and rushed into the hole at an extremely fast speed. It was filled with rich vitality and spiritual energy, which was completely different from the corrosive spiritual energy outside. For the time being, the corrosive spiritual energy wouldn't be able to corrode this place. The rich spiritual energy meant that the people here could use the energy in their bodies to attack without restraint. They didn't have to worry that they wouldn't be able to replenish their energy in time after using it up. Boom! The moment they entered the cave, an attack erupted from the team. The Flying Star Lin family took the lead in attacking Luo Qingtong and the others. Chapter 2648. The Flying Star Lin family was also competitive, but unlike the Tianfeng Chu family, Lin Xingqian's position in the Flying Star Lin family had been consolidated. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lin family were convinced of his ability and strength and were willing to work for him. As long as the Flying Star Lin family got their hands on the Tianluo grass, it didn't matter who got it. However, the Tianfeng Chu family couldn't. They couldn't let the Tianfeng Chu family get their hands on the Tianluo grass. Therefore, the people of the Lin family of the Flying Star launched attacks on Luo Qingtong and the others after they entered the hole. Boom! The Tianfeng Chu family members were shocked and enraged by the attacks. B***starred. Chu Qiankong and the others were almost at the same level as Yi Qianxian. They had to dodge when they saw the attacks coming at them. Yi Qianxian's eyes flickered as he raised his hand and blocked the attacks. However, Beiqing Fengyu and the others did not show their true strength. When they blocked the attacks, they pretended to be shocked and took 2 steps back. Boom! With the help of the strike, the members of the Lin family of the Flying Star sector had already rushed into the depths of the cave ahead of them. Chu Qiankong and the others were furious when they saw this. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at Yi Qianxian. With the strength of this man and Beiqing Fengyu, how could they be pushed back by the Lin family of the Flying Star realm? What joke! Luo Qingtong had seen Yi Qianxian shatter the attacks with ease. It was as if he had crushed a few pieces of tofu. Luo Qingtong had been worried that his blocking would worsen the damage to his meridians. When she saw this, the corners of her mouth twitched and she put away her worries. If he could hurt Yi Qianxian by chopping a few pieces of tofu, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Just how strong was this man after he unleashed his full power? Luo Qingtong was inexplicably in a trance. When she was at the true Spill Continent, she had never seen Yi Qianxian use his full strength. At that time, she knew that Yi Qianxian's strength was far from the upper limit of true Spill Continent strength. The only time this man was weak was probably before she met him, when his meridians were weak and torn. However, after being healed by the energy in her body, the strength of his meridians increased. From then on, she could no longer feel the upper limit of his strength. Now that he was in the outer realms, it was still the same. This man was really too strong. Indeed, all the hot-blooded genes in her that refused to admit defeat had been aroused. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a domineering and devilish smile. Her head was lowered, so Yi Qianxian couldn't see the curve of her lips, but he could feel her puzzled gaze. He knew that she was wondering why he didn't continue to attack, even though he could clearly block the attack. There's no need. Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent. Luo Qingtong soon understood the meaning of Yi Qianxian's words. When Yi Qianxian's voice sounded, sharp screams and roars suddenly erupted from the depths of the hole in front of them. Then, there was the sound of flesh being torn apart. In this sealed underground hole, it was exceptionally loud and mournful. It's the people from the Flying Star Lian family who entered before. Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed, and she looked into the depths of the hole in front of her. Chu Qiankong and the others, who were originally furious and wanted to chase after them, were also stunned. Chapter 26:49. A group of people suddenly appeared in the depths of the cave. They were the people from the Flying Star Lian family who'd charged in earlier. Fall back. Lian Xingqian and the others were covered in blood. The top disciples of the Flying Star Lian family were at the back of the group, swords in hand. Beside them were the guards of the top disciples. At this moment, their numbers seemed to have decreased by a lot. Nearly a third of their people had disappeared. Not only that, but the mercenaries around the ordinary disciples of the Flying Star Lian family had also decreased in number. They were either injured or crippled. Under the protection of Lian Xingqian and the others, they were charging toward the entrance of the cave where Luo Qingtong and the others were. Behind Lian Xingqian and the others, violent roars rang out one after another. The next second, there was a loud boom. Transparent figures, which seemed to have become one with the dense spiritual energy around them, leaped around the cave and chased after the Flying Star Lian family. Bang! A transparent figure jumped onto a rock wall. Then, with a boom, its four limbs and claws sank deep into the rock wall. The solid rock walls and boulders in the underground cave were all smashed into smithereens. It had to be known that the rock walls of the underground cave, where the heart of the continent was located, could even withstand the scouring of the aura of the great Tao that had erupted. Its hardness was far beyond that of ordinary rock formations. However, at this moment, under the scratches of these transparent figures, they were shattered into fragments of sand and stone. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and the others finally got a good look at the transparent figures. These transparent silhouettes were actually monsters of unknown origin. They were all grotesque in appearance. Some were covered in scales and had feathers on their heads. Some were crawling on the ground with limbs as thick as pillars. They looked like beast legs, but were actually bird claws. These transparent figures were all grotesque in appearance. When they let out sharp roars, the invisible spiritual energy around them surged violently. The great Tao has turned into a spirit. These are all creatures formed by the great Tao's power. When the heavenly wind Chu clan members saw this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The great Tao transforming into a spirit. What kind of concept was that? Legend has it that the 3,000 great Taos all have their own spirits. Primordial chaos split open the heavens, evolving all things and then evolving the laws. When the primordial chaos opened the heavens, it gave birth to the spirit of the grand Tao. These living beings were the embodiments of the great Tao laws. They were innate divine beings. They could freely manipulate any type of law and transform into a myriad of forms. Any cultivation method would be useless against them. Only an Almighty who had completely mastered a certain law of heaven and earth would be able to use the power of the great path that he had mastered to deal with them. However, the spiritualization of the great Tao only existed in legends. Moreover, there was a fixed number of great Tao spirits. Only under extremely harsh circumstances would a great Tao spirit be born. Why did so many great Tao spirits suddenly appear here? Could it be that the power of laws from the heart of the continent had already surpassed the power of laws of the world? Had it reached the level where it could recreate primordial chaos and split the world apart? This was utter nonsense. As everyone thought this, they quickly recovered from their shock and astonishment. It's not the great Tao spirit transformation. A disciple of the Tianfeng Chu clan said. Chapter 2650. If the power of the great path here has reached the level where it can transform into a spirit, we'll be crushed to death by the pressure of the spiritual qi before we even enter the hole. He said with certainty, it's impossible for there to be a single living thing on this abandoned continent, and it won't become an abandoned continent. One could imagine how rich the power of the great path here was to be able to evolve into a great path creature. Hongmeng had opened the heavens. That was the power of creation. Wasn't it normal for it to bring a small, abandoned continent back to life? Moreover, the strength of these great path spirits was a little too weak. When the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan heard him say this, they immediately raised their heads to look at the transformed great path spirits. They discovered that their auras were indeed only at the level of the human martial realm. Although they looked very powerful, due to the limitations of their strength, it was impossible for them to be so powerful that they could defy the natural order. And the strength of the great path spirits was definitely not this weak. So these aren't great path spirits? A disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan asked hesitantly. But these transparent figures were clearly the characteristics of great path spirits. It was impossible for the crowd to be mistaken. I don't know either. The disciple from the Tianfeng Chu clan said with a frown. What I can be sure of is that these things are definitely not real great path spirits, but they do seem to be transformed by the power of the great path here. This was a little inconceivable. They weren't great path spirits, but they were transformed by the power of the great path. And the power of the great path here clearly hadn't reached the level where it could manifest into a spirit. Everyone was conflicted. At this moment, these pseudo-great Tao spirits instantly screamed and pounced at the crowd. Some of them pounced on Luo Qingtong and the others. Others pounced on the people from the Flying Star Lien clan. Seeing this scene, the faces of the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan froze. Quick, don't think so much. Deal with them first. Although they didn't know what was going on with these fake great path spirits, the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't have time to think too much when they saw them pounce on them. These fake great path spirits were clearly trying to drive them out of this hole. However, the heart of the continent only opened once a year. There was only one chance to enter at a time. Once they left this place, they could forget about entering it again. And if they waited another year, who knew what would happen to the Tianluo grass? What if it withered after reaching maturity? Wouldn't they miss this opportunity? With such thoughts in mind, how could they have the time to think about anything else? Immediately, they drew out their weapons and prepared to deal with the attacks of these fake great Tao spirits. At this time, Chu Lingfeng had already rushed in front of Yi Qianxian. He angrily wanted Yi Qianxian to return Luo Qingtong to him, but the youth silently glared at him. No! Luo Qingtong's lips parted slightly as she silently mouthed something to Chu Lingfeng. Given the urgency of the situation, it was best for her to stay by Yi Qianxian's side. For the time being, she did not intend to reveal her identity and abilities. Therefore, she did not want to be a burden to Chu Lingfeng. Mas, Chu Lingfeng fiercely stomped his feet, almost exposing Luo Qingtong's identity. He looked at Luo Qingtong with a pair of aggrieved and red eyes, looking like a big fierce dog that was afraid of angering its master. Luo Qingtong was both angry and amused when she saw his pitiful appearance. This silly big guy was really something. Chapter 26:51. Your clothes are a bit messy. As he spoke, he quietly grabbed Luo Qingtong's collar and lifted it up, as if he was helping her fix her clothes. Luo Qingtong froze for a moment. "Oh," she responded in a low voice and nodded at Yi Qianxian. "Thank you, brother." "You're welcome." Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes slightly. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. Then he glanced at Chu Lingfeng. The latter's eyes were scarlet red, and he looked at him with a ferocious gaze like a ferocious beast. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong was in his arms, Chu Lingfeng would have already pounced on him. The latter saw a red mark on Luo Qingtong's neck near her collarbone. He didn't know when that red mark was left there. The color was a little light, but he could vaguely see that it was a hickey. It was a hickey on Master's body. Thinking of how Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian were inseparable, and how tolerant Luo Qingtong was towards Yi Qianxian, even letting him hug her waist, Chu Lingfeng's eyes seemed to spit fire as he glared at Yi Qianxian. This man actually dared to plot against Master. Sob, sob, sob. Ming Zun, I couldn't protect Master. I'm sorry. Chu Lingfeng was anxious and angry, but Yi Qianxian's gaze was indifferent. The other party always wanted to snatch Luo Qingtong away from him. Previously, they hadn't entered the heart of the continent, so he could temporarily let go. But now, they had already entered the heart of the continent. The situation here was unknown, and something similar to the great Tao spirit had appeared. Yi Qianxian couldn't let Luo Qingtong leave his side. He didn't feel at ease leaving Luo Qingtong anywhere other than by his side. His woman should naturally be protected by him. However, in the end, Chu Lingfeng was protecting him and was loyal to Luo Qingtong. Yi Qianxian naturally wouldn't have a conflict with him. He used this method to make him back off. Presumably, when he saw this hickey, he would know that Luo Qingtong's attitude towards him was not ordinary. He would not think of taking this woman back by force. In fact, Chu Lingfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He looked at Luo Qingtong with an unspeakable grievance in his eyes. His master still said that she didn't fall in love with someone else. There were even hickeys on her body. God knows that Luo Qingtong didn't even know about this. For the past few nights, she thought that she was sleepwalking and plotting against Yi Qianxian. How could she know that Yi Qianxian had already seen through her identity? This hickey was left behind at that time, because he didn't want Luo Qingtong to know that he had seen through her identity. Yi Qianxian deliberately left this hickey on Luo Qingtong's body in a very hidden place. Unless Luo Qingtong took off her clothes and looked at herself in the mirror, it was impossible to find out. But in this abandoned continent, where would there be a mirror to look at? Even if there was, Luo Qingtong didn't have the leisure to look at it. Therefore, she never found out. At this time, Yi Qianxian deliberately left it out for Chu Lingfeng to see. She didn't know it all. When she saw Chu Lingfeng's expression change to one of grief, indignation, and grievance, she felt a wave of depression in her heart. What was going on? Why did this silly big guy's appearance become so strange? However, before Luo Qingtong could think about it, those pseudo-great Tao spirits had already rushed in front of them. Boom! Chapter 26:52. The latter's shrill cry was so loud that it hurt everyone's eardrums. Not only that, but the transparent figures that were facing the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family were instantly washed away like water and light. Then, with a bang, their auras scattered into the surrounding vitality and spirit qi, avoiding the attacks of the Tianfeng Chu family. Before anyone could react, their figures condensed again in midair, and then pounced on the people of the Tianfeng Chu family. Ah! A sharp scream sounded, and a guard of a top disciple was pounced on by a transparent figure. In an instant, his body was torn to pieces by the transparent figure in front of everyone's eyes. Rip! The guard's blood splattered and turned into minced meat that filled the sky. In contrast, The transparent monster was abnormally fierce. Roar! It roared in a low voice and pounced on the others again. The other people of the Tianfeng Chu family also encountered the same attack. Everyone's faces were filled with panic. They never thought that these fake Great Path spirits would have such an attack method. This is the characteristic of the Great Path spirits. The disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family from before shouted loudly. These things are indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. Although I don't know why they can manifest as spirits, they're indeed Great Path spirits. You must be careful. The Great Path spirits were born from the spirit Qi. Naturally, they could transform into thousands of illusions at any time and anywhere and integrate into the spirit Qi. Moreover, they could control their own laws and attack everyone. These transparent figures were indeed formed by the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent. However, they were not as powerful as the real Great Path spirits. It must be because the power of the Great Path in the heart of the continent had not reached the level of being able to manifest as spirits, but it had given birth to Great Path spirits. Everyone was shocked, but they had no time to think too much at this time. Those Great Path spirits were coming menacingly. Because they did not expect their methods before, in an instant, many people died, tragically like the previous guard. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family were a mess. As for the Tao spirits, they either dissipated or reformed. They dissipated like mist inside the hole, but they were everywhere. Their strength was formidable, and their attacks were ferocious. Almost every time they attacked, they could take away the lives of a large number of Tianfeng Chu family members. Only now did the members of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan realize why the members of the Flying Star Lien clan looked so pitiful. It was obvious that the Lien family of the Flying Star sector was much more united and capable than theirs. The strength of these Great Path spirits wasn't particularly strong. Logically speaking, they were only in the human martial arts realm. Even though their claws could break gold and stones, they should not have been able to push the Lien family of the Flying Star to such a level. In just a few breaths, he was driven out from the depths of the hole in front. It turned out that the attacks of these Great Path spirits were too strange. It was almost impossible to hurt or touch. These Great Path spirits could only attack when they were in their true forms. And when they transformed into Spirit Qi, there was no trace of them at all. However, it just so happened that they transformed into spiritual energy, gathering and dispersing extremely quickly. Chapter 2653. If the Flying Star Lien family hadn't attracted some of the Great Path spirits for them, they would have been in the same predicament as the Flying Star Lien family. However, the Flying Star Lien family had suffered so much that they couldn't hold on any longer. Once they couldn't hold on any longer, the Tianfeng Chu family would be the next unlucky ones. Not only did the Tianfeng Chu family know about this, but the Flying Star Lien family also knew about it. They were lucky to have the upper hand before, but who would have thought that there was such a thing in the depths of the cave? They had been attacked by the Great Path spirits, and the advantage they had against the Tianfeng Chu family was gone. At this moment, only by cooperating with the Tianfeng Chu family could they get through this crisis and continue to advance into the depths of the cave. Thinking about this, Lien Xingqian forced a Great Path spirit in front of him away with his sword and scattered the spirit Qi that it had transformed into. Then, he looked at Luo Qingtong and said, "Let's cooperate." His voice was sonorous and powerful. He didn't look at Chu Qiankong and the others, nor did he look at Chu Lingfeng. Instead, he looked at Luo Qingtong. This was because he could see that in the Tianfeng Chu family's team, only Luo Qingtong could make the decision and make the Tianfeng Chu family obey her without any objections. This young man controlled most of the mercenary teams, and Chu Lingfeng, as the young master of the Chu family, was willing to listen to her. Plus, the 8th Elder's people. As long as Luo Qingtong agreed to cooperate with him, Chu Qiankong and the others would have to agree even if they didn't want to. Therefore, Lien Xingqian didn't ask anyone but Luo Qingtong. Who would have thought that the person in charge of the Tianfeng Chu family's team was a young mercenary who hadn't even reached the venerable realm? Okay. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes slightly. She was naturally able to see the situation in this battle. The people of the Flying Star Lin family could not be defeated. Otherwise, the people on their side would have to face the full attack of the Dao Spirit. Luo Qingtong and the others had just entered the hole. They hadn't even seen the heart of the continent and the Tianluo grass yet. How could the Lin family and the Tianfeng Chu family suffer such heavy casualties? He didn't know what else was in the depths of this hole. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she agreed without hesitation. Hearing her words, a trace of anger flashed across the faces of Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuanhong, and the others. The Tianfeng Chu family actually needed an outsider to make decisions for them. It was simply hateful. They had lost all face, and Chu Yuqing and the others were even more furious. The latter was almost beaten half to death by him just now. It wasn't until the heart of the continent's last burst of energy that he came back to his senses. He realized that he had fallen into Luo Qingtong's trap. He was a top disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family, yet he had slapped himself in the face and apologized to Luo Qingtong after she threatened him. Not only that, he had even beaten himself to the point of vomiting blood several times. As the saying goes, a scholar can be killed, but not humiliated. What had he been thinking? Why had he agreed to Luo Qingtong's conditions? And why had he beaten himself up to avenge Luo Qingtong? Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back, and he almost fainted on the spot. If he hadn't known that the heart of the continent was completely open and that the Tianluo grass was at hand, he wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Chapter 2654. Luo Shaoqi. What right do you have to make a decision on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan? He shouted angrily. You don't have to agree. I'm sure the Lin clan will be happy to do so. Luo Qingtong snorted coldly. When did Chu Yuqing think this was going to happen? He didn't have to agree, but he would have to lead his people to survive on their own. Luo Qingtong was very happy. Presumably, the Lin clan was thinking the same thing. After all, if the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces were scattered, it would be a good thing for the Lin clan, who had suffered heavy losses. However, Luo Qingtong wasn't ready to divide the Tianfeng Chu clan's forces for the time being. At this time, more people meant more help. She and Yi Qianming would be able to save a lot of effort. Otherwise, why would she pay attention to Chu Yuqing? She would have kicked him out long ago. Hearing this, Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. He was just making a fuss. Chu Yuqing wasn't stupid. Lian Xingchen had asked Luo Qingtong, which meant that their opinions weren't important. Hateful Chu Lingfeng, that idiot, listen to that bitch. Otherwise, how could they have ended up in this situation? Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. His face was green, red, and white, like a colorful color palette. However, he didn't dare to leave in a huff. Otherwise, if he left the group, he would be tortured to death by the spirits of the great Tao. It was also impractical to leave this place. Previously, they had refused to leave in every possible way. Now that the cave was surrounded by spirits of the great Tao, even the way out was blocked. They couldn't leave even if they wanted to. Thinking of this, Chu Yuqing's expression became more and more colorful. Under everyone's gazes, his face turned the color of a pig's liver. Luo Qingtong was too lazy to pay attention to him. Seeing that he was so sullen that he didn't dare to speak, she snorted coldly and said to everyone, "Let's go. We're going to the Lin clan." As soon as she spoke, Yi Qianming brought her forward. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others followed closely behind, followed by Chu Lingfeng, Chu Xiaofeng, and Gui Feng. As soon as the group of people moved, the others could only follow suit. Although Chu Qiankong and the others were not worried, they knew that joining hands with the Lin family of the Flying Star sector was the best choice right now. Without the lips, the teeth would feel cold, unless they didn't want the Tianluo grass anymore. Otherwise, they would have to cooperate with the Lin family of the Flying Star sector. They were supposed to agree to this, but Lian Xingchen only asked Luo Qingtong and not them. Did he think that they were inferior to Luo Qingtong? Chu Qiankong and the others felt extremely stifled after being suppressed by a young mercenary who wasn't even a venerate. They weren't much better off than Chu Yuqing. It was just that he didn't fly into a rage like Chu Yuqing. Lian Xingqian and the others were finally able to catch their breath when they met up with the Flying Star Lian family. They had just withstood the endless attacks of the spirits of the Great Tao and were about to collapse. The spirits of the Great Tao also seemed to be very intelligent. When they saw that Luo Qingtong and the others had joined hands with the Lian family of the Flying Star sector, their attacks became even fiercer. If this continued, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't be able to hurt the spirits of the Great Tao, while the latter would be able to continuously injure them. Sooner or later, they would be exhausted and die here. Is there any way? Yi Qianming's expression was indifferent. Chapter 2655. If someone could perceive the existence of these Great Tao spirits, they would find that the Great Tao spirit dissipated by Yi Qianming seemed to be hidden in the spiritual qi and dissipated into nothingness. But in fact, it was completely killed by Yi Qianming. The man's attack directly injured the source. Even if these Great Tao spirits escaped into the spiritual qi after dissipating, they couldn't escape death. It was completely different from others who simply dissipated those Great Tao spirits. He didn't mean anything else by asking Luo Qingtong. He just thought that this woman had many means and extraordinary abilities. Even if her identity was hidden, she might be able to think of a way to deal with these Great Tao spirits. Of course, it didn't matter if she couldn't think of a way. At worst, he would just have to put in more effort. Yi Qianxian thought so, and suddenly raised his hand to shatter another Great Tao spirit. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were not as efficient as him. However, when the group worked together, they quickly killed the Great Path spirits around them one by one. If someone noticed them during the battle, they would find that the number of Great Tao spirits on their side was the least, and there were fewer and fewer of them. And because these Great Tao spirits were constantly dissipating and manifesting, they were killed by Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others without leaving any traces. No one noticed that something was wrong here. Luo Qingtong heard Yi Qianming's words and nodded subconsciously. Yes, but I don't know if it's effective. Luo Qingtong said and frowned. These Great Tao spirits were originally formed by the power of the Great Tao in the depths of this hole. In this case, even if Luo Qingtong had a pair of blood eyes, it was impossible to see their hidden traces, because they themselves were the spiritual qi. Of course, Luo Qingtong could lock onto them when they first appeared. But even if Luo Qingtong pointed out the place where these Great Tao spirits appeared, by the time everyone's attack hit, these Great Tao spirits might have already dissipated. Unless those people could directly lock onto the place where they would appear with their blood eyes like Luo Qingtong and kill them directly. But that was impossible, and Luo Qingtong couldn't reveal her ability just like that. She narrowed her eyes. After carefully observing these Tao spirits, a vague idea flashed through her mind. However, this idea wasn't mature yet, so she wasn't prepared to say it out loud. She wanted to observe it more carefully. Who would have thought that Yi Qianxian would ask such a question? Yes. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He nodded and looked at Luo Qingtong. He whispered, "What is it? Tell me." Yes. Thinking of her current identity as Luo Qingtong, who was famous for her meticulous observation, Luo Qingtong was not afraid that Yi Qianxian would find anything wrong with her. She voiced out her thoughts. I'm thinking that since the spirits of the Great Path in the depths of these holes are formed from the power of the Great Path, then would they be afraid of the decaying spirit energy outside? Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, Yi Qianxian's eyes lit up in an instant. He looked at Luo Qingtong. In his eyes, there was an indescribable meaning. This woman was still the same as before. She could see through the essence at a glance. She thought she hid it well. Chapter 2656. Even if Luo Qingtong didn't expose her identity to Yi Qianxian, she couldn't hide it anymore. However, Yi Qianxian didn't intend to expose Luo Qingtong's identity, so he didn't say anything even if he knew. He just looked at her meaningfully and nodded. You're right. Since these great Tao spirits are formed by the vitality energy, the decaying spiritual energy outside must be their enemy. These great Tao spirits were the power of the great Tao, so they would lead the decaying spiritual energy in and corrode the vitality energy. In this way, these great Tao spirits would have nowhere to hide. As Yi Qianren said this, she immediately ordered Beiqing and Fengyu, who were beside her, go and draw in the decaying spiritual energy from the outside. The vitality energy in the heart of the continent had just erupted, so the decaying spiritual energy outside wouldn't be able to invade so quickly. He had to send people to bring the decaying spiritual energy in. When Beiqing and Fengyu heard this, they didn't say anything and directly rushed to the entrance of the hole. There was a group of great Tao spirits guarding the entrance, but they were no match for Beiqing and Fengyu at all. They were directly killed. Then the group rushed out of the hole. The people from the Lin family and the Tianfeng Chu family didn't know what was going on. They only saw Beiqing and Fengyu rushing out of the hole and thought that they had given up on escaping. However, the other party was too strong. It was impossible for the people from the Flying Star Lin clan and the Heavenly Wind Chu clan to directly disperse the Tao spirits guarding the entrance like they did. Everyone was shocked. As for Chu Yuqing, he laughed and schadenfreude. Ha ha, Luo Xiaoqi, your bodyguards abandoned you and your employer and ran away. He looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, thinking that Beiqing and Fengyu were the bodyguards hired by Yi Qianxian. From the looks of it, the other party had abandoned the two of them and fled. Chu Yuqing was gloating inwardly, but Luo Qingtong didn't feel like paying him any attention. When Beiqing and Fengyu brought in the decaying spirit qi, he realized that he had made a mistake. At that time, this hole would be filled with decaying spiritual qi. Let's see how he can still smile. In fact, this was indeed the case. If the decaying spirit qi filled the hole, then everyone's attacks would be limited. After all, although the decaying spirit qi didn't harm them, it couldn't replenish their strength. Luo Qingtong knew that the white jade masked man was Yi Qianxian, so she told him her idea. If it had been someone else, she might not have said it. After all, this method was somewhat risky. If they brought in the decaying spirit qi, but it was useless against the great Tao spirits, then they would be in big trouble. With their attacks and power limited, their situation would be even worse than before. Of course, Luo Qingtong didn't care about the existence of the decaying spirit qi. She'd stockpiled countless spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs outside. It was more than enough for Yi, Qianxian, and the others to replenish their strength. It was the same for Chu Xiaofeng and the others. However, the same couldn't be said for the people from the Lin family and Chu Yuqing. Therefore, she couldn't be bothered to listen to Chu Yuqing's mockery. When Beiqing and Fengyu brought in the decaying spirit qi, they'd make him cry. Chapter 2657. He'd suffered a few losses in front of Luo Qingtong before. Now that he'd finally found a way to regain some face, how could he let it go so easily? But before his mocking laughter could be heard for long, his voice came to an abrupt halt, as if someone had caught it in his throat. You talk too much nonsense. Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. He stared coldly at Chu Yuqing, as if he were looking at a dead man. Chu Yuqing's hair stood on end. He didn't know why, but when Yi Qianren looked at him like this, his heart and even his soul suddenly felt like he was going to die. His heart was in a state of panic, but his expression remained fierce. He yelled, "Who do you think you are?" Before he could finish a sentence, there was a commotion outside the cave. Boom! A violent and powerful aura suddenly exploded from the outside. In the next second, streams of decaying spiritual energy suddenly surged in from outside the hole's entrance. The dark gray spirit qi followed behind Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others as it violently surged into the hole and rushed into it. Seeing this scene, Chu Yuqing's voice was stuck in his throat. He watched as Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others rushed in from outside the hole. His expression was completely distorted. "Bastards, what have you done? You've actually brought in all that decaying spiritual energy. Do you know that this will kill us?" Chu Yuqing's voice was extremely shrill. His voice was like a cold owl, piercing through the hole. It was so sharp that it sounded like a demon's voice piercing through one's ears. But he didn't realize it at all. He only looked at the scene outside the hole, flustered and exasperated. He didn't know how Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had done it. They'd opened up a path through the spiritual energy outside, forcibly bringing in the decaying spiritual energy that had been blocked outside. Chu Yuqing was practically stamping with rage. When the decaying spirit qi rushed in, they would lose their advantage of not having to worry about exhausting their strength. At that time, wouldn't they all die at the hands of these great Tao spirits? Thinking of this, his expression became extremely ferocious. He almost rushed in front of Luo Qingtong and attacked her. However, before he could do anything, Chu Lingfeng and the others had already stood in front of Luo Qingtong. "You are not allowed to touch her." Chu Lingfeng's voice was cold. He didn't care what Luo Qingtong had done. Anyway, in his opinion, whatever Luo Qingtong did was right. Even if the other party wanted his life, he would still do it. The only thing that made him depressed was that his master really shouldn't have abandoned Mingzun. The man in front of her was too hateful. He glared fiercely at Yi Qianxian, then said to Chu Yuqing, "If you dare to touch her, I'll throw you out." If his master hadn't forbidden him from attacking Chu Yuqing and the others, they wouldn't even know how they died. He actually wanted to attack Luo Qingtong. When Chu Yuqing heard Chu Lingfeng's words, he almost fainted. "Chu Lingfeng, this idiot. Luo Shaoqi is about to kill all of us, but he still wants to protect her? Does he have a brain?" "That's right, he's an idiot. There's no such thing as a brain." Chapter 2658. As soon as he said that, before Chu Qiankong and the others could say anything, Lin Xingqian's voice sounded faintly. "She's not trying to kill us. Look carefully." As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in the direction Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were coming from. Under their lead, the dark gray, decaying spiritual energy behind them surged violently into the hole. Wherever it passed, the spirits of the Great Path, who had gathered again to guard the entrance of the hole, kept retreating in fear, as if they were very afraid of the decaying spiritual energy. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others rushed towards them without being stopped at all. On the contrary, the spirits of the Great Path kept retreating. Not only that, they saw one of Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others shatter a spirit of the Great Path, who was enveloped by the decaying spiritual energy in time, with a punch. Something surprising happened. The great Tao spirit's figure dissipated and turned into invisible spirit qi. However, because it was surrounded by decaying spiritual energy, its spiritual energy couldn't dissipate into the decaying spiritual energy and was forcibly devoured. The decaying spiritual energy was the nemesis of these spirits of the Great Path. When everyone saw this, how could they not understand why Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had led the decaying spiritual energy into the hole? Luo Qingtong wasn't harming them. She was clearly saving them. After all, compared to the harm of not being able to replenish their strength from the decaying spiritual energy, it was more important to be able to kill these spirits of the Great Path that they were almost unable to deal with. Not only that, but they could also continue to move deeper into the hole and obtain the Tianluo grass. This was incomparable to anything else. So what if they couldn't replenish their strength? Didn't they still have those spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that they picked from outside? With this thought in mind, how could they blame Luo Qingtong at all? Even Chu Qiankong and the others, who had been angry at the beginning and were ready to attack with Chu Yuqing and the others, no longer had any objections. As for Chu Yuqing, he looked as if he had just been viciously slapped in the face. The expression on his face changed from arrogance, to clamoring, to stamping with rage, and finally to an indescribable embarrassment. Everyone looked at the expression on his face and felt embarrassed for him. From the very beginning, Chu Yuqing had been making things difficult for Luo Qingtong the moment he saw her. Who knew how many times he'd been slapped in the face, but he still didn't get tired of it. He really was a true warrior. The crowd sighed in their hearts. As for Chu Ku-er and the others, they were gnashing their teeth so hard that their teeth were about to fall off. Previously, they thought that Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to escape punishment this time. What a big crime to bring in that decaying spiritual energy. If they joined forces, they would be able to kill Luo Qingtong. In the end, the situation was reversed. Not only was Luo Qingtong fine, but she was also regarded as the savior of the world. The decaying spirit qi actually had the effect of restraining and killing these great Tao spirits. With the help of the decaying spirit qi, the crowd was no longer helpless against these great Tao spirits. This undoubtedly allowed Luo Qingtong to establish great prestige in front of everyone. Chapter 2659. Moreover, he would owe her a huge favor. How could such a thing happen to Luo Qingtong? Chu Yufei's heart was filled with hatred. Chu Yuqing, this idiot, he might as well not have said that Luo Qingtong was the one who did it. Great, now that he had caused a ruckus. He had helped Luo Qingtong expand her prestige. This idiot. Chu Yufei's heart felt like it was being sliced by a knife. She had always boasted that her schemes weren't bad, but Luo Qingtong was better than her in every way. Not only had she ruined her plans several times, she had also stolen the limelight this time. Chu Yufei had always been the object of admiration and protection wherever she went. But first, she had run into a wall with Yi Qianxian, and then Luo Qingtong's radiance had suppressed her to the point that she couldn't even be compared to the background. This was a huge blow to her prideful and vain heart. Fortunately, this Luo Xiaoqi was a man. If it had been a woman, the jealousy and hatred in Chu Yufei's heart was like a poisonous fog, constantly churning in her mind. By the time everyone saw the effects of the dark gray, decaying spiritual energy, Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others had led the dark gray fog to them. This group of people was deliberately delaying. Otherwise, with their strength, how could they have taken so long to rush back to Luo Qingtong's group after the Great Path spirits had been forced to retreat? They had only done this so that everyone could better see the benefits and effects of the dark gray, decaying spiritual energy. They had clearly heard Chu Yuqing's mockery earlier. He actually dared to mock their mistress. Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others' eyes were cold as they looked in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group. After this matter was over, they would definitely let them know how the word death was written. Young master, it's done. They nodded to Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. She was calling Yi Qianxian, who was also Luo Qingtong's current identity. After all, the girl had not fully recovered her identity yet. Even if Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others knew that the other party was their mistress, they would not expose Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian's identities at this time. Yes, Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent as he responded in a low voice. He looked at the decaying spirit qi that had been attracted by Beiqing and Fengyu. At this moment, the decaying spirit qi was rolling and attacking the surrounding life spirit qi. Luo Qingtong and the others were surrounded by the decaying spiritual energy. The spirits of the great path that had surrounded them and attacked them were now shrieking and retreating into the depths of the hole. The people of the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lin clan finally had a chance to catch their breath. Come on, let's chase after them. Everyone was very excited. Looking at the spirits of the great path retreating into the depths of the hole, everyone's breathing became much heavier. If they killed these spirits of the great path, wouldn't the Tianluo grass nurtured in the heart of the continent in the depths of the hole belong to them? However, although everyone was very excited, some people still remembered the attack that the Flying Star Lin clan had encountered when they had rushed into the depths of the hole. Who knew what else was in the depths of the hole? If there was another ambush, it was likely that all of them would die here. Therefore, even if some people were clamoring to rush in and kill their way in, they would not be able to escape. Chapter 2660. What do you think, young Master Shao Qi? Should we continue chasing after them? One of the Flying Star Lin family's top disciples asked, his expression extremely respectful. Even his tone was indescribably polite and gentle. It was clear that after this incident, the Flying Star Lin family had thoroughly acknowledged Luo Qingtong's abilities. They valued and trusted her greatly. Not only that, but when they'd asked the youth for help, he'd agreed without hesitation. Chu Yuqing had even made things difficult for him. If not for the use agreement, the Flying Star Lin family probably wouldn't have received any help from the Tianfeng Chu clan. Chu Yuqing and the others would definitely have reprimanded and humiliated them in every possible way. By then, not only would the dignity of the Lin family of the Flying Star sector be gone, even the capability of the team would suffer a blow that was even more severe than before. Therefore, the Flying Star Lin family members were extremely grateful to Luo Qingtong. As for Chu Yuqing and the others, they didn't even bother to look at them. In truth, Chu Yuqing had been wrongly accused. He was unhappy that the Flying Star Lin family wanted to ally with the Tianfeng Chu clan, not with them, but with Luo Qingtong. That was why he'd spoken out against Luo Qingtong, not because he wanted to refuse the Flying Star Lin family's alliance. But in that situation, when his words fell on the Flying Star Lin family's ears, they thought he was unwilling to agree to their request for help. Moreover, he didn't allow Luo Qingtong to agree to their request. That was why he'd gotten into a fight with Luo Qingtong. It could be said that this was all a beautiful misunderstanding. If Chu Yuqing knew that his indignant actions had ended up benefiting Luo Qingtong, increasing her standing in the hearts of the Flying Star Lin clan's people, while also harming himself, who knew if he would spit out a mouthful of blood. Luo Qingtong immediately nodded when she heard the Flying Star Lin family's question. We can chase after them. Her blood-red eyes flashed faintly. She didn't see the Tao spirits laying down any ambush in the depths. It was very clear that they were truly afraid of the decaying spiritual qi. They had already completely retreated, shrinking into an even deeper place. All right, the top disciple of the Flying Star Lin family was overjoyed. He then looked at Lin Xingchen beside him. Young master, the latter had just been severely injured while blocking the attacks of those great Tao spirits. Those Tao spirits had come so suddenly that Lin Xingchen had suffered several serious injuries in order to protect the Lin family disciples around him. At this moment, he had just finished bandaging and treating his wounds. When he heard this, he immediately nodded and said, "Listen to little seventh young master. Let's go." As he spoke, he looked deeply at Luo Qingtong. Just now, when they were outside the cave, Luo Qingtong had been forced by Chu Yuqing and the others to ask for his help and respectfully address him as young Lord Lin. Now, the other party was qualified for him to call him little seventh young master. The fate of life was truly peculiar, and this young man's ability was far more complicated than he had imagined. I wonder how much the seventh young master's bodyguards have consumed after going out to draw in the decaying spiritual energy. If you don't mind, the Flying Star Lin family is willing to protect little seventh young master. We can swear an oath to the heavens that we won't harm you in the slightest, nor will we secretly imprison you. When it's time to seize the Tianluo grass, we'll compete fairly with the Tianfeng Chu family. What do you think? Chapter 2661. His eyes were extremely bright. The young man originally had an extremely handsome and noble demeanor, but his steadiness made him even more domineering. His complexion was slightly pale, but the words he spoke were very orderly and sonorous. If it weren't for the fact that Yi Qianxian and the others were by Luo Qingtong's side, she might have really agreed to his request. After all, he had a thorough understanding of the Tianfeng Chu clan situation. Luo Qingtong was currently in the Tianfeng Chu clan's ranks. Although her prestige was very high, the only people under her control were the mercenaries Chu Lingfeng and the 8th Elder's people. Chu Qiankong, Chu Yuqing, and the others were completely unreliable. Not only were they unreliable, but but she didn't know when they would seize the opportunity to make a move against her. Under such circumstances, if the people around her were exhausted, it would be better to go to the Feishing Lian clan, who had no grudges with her and owed her a favor. However, by Luo Qingtong's side was Yi Qianxian. In this world, there was no place safer than being by Yi Qianxian's side. Luo Qingtong chuckled. No need, young Master Lian. Just take care of yourself. Naturally, someone will protect me. Her words were ambiguous. Those who didn't know better would think that she was talking about Chu Lingfeng. In reality, only Luo Qingtong knew that she was talking about Yi Qianxian. Of course, that man didn't need to know. She was still hiding her identity. She didn't know that under the white jade mask, Yi Qianxian's lips had already curled up slightly. However, his expression was that of a soft snort. At least this woman was tactful and didn't leave his side again. But why were all these people trying to snatch people away from him? Forget about Chu Lingfeng. What was wrong with this young Master Lian? Did he look so weak that he couldn't even protect this woman? As Yi Qianxian thought about this, he felt extremely displeased. He looked coldly at Lian Xingqian and said, "Young Master Lian, just worry about yourself. The capability of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector is not enough to protect her." While he was talking, the members of the Lian family of the Flying Star sector slightly changed their expressions. Just as someone was about to reprimand him for his audacity, they saw that beside Yi Qianxian, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others suddenly burst forth with extremely powerful energy. LV9 Human Martial Realm, LV9 Human Martial Realm, LV9 Human Martial Realm. All of them were at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm, which made everyone's complexion change. This was especially true for the Tianfeng Chu family. No one had expected the people behind Yi Qianxian to be so powerful. 9th level of the Human Martial Realm. One had to know that the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan also had guards with such strength, but there were only 1 or 2 of them at most. How could they compare to Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others behind Yi Qianxian, who were all at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm? The combined strength of all the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan and their LV9 Human Martial Realm experts would only be able to match the strength of the people behind Yi Qianxian. In other words, the strength of Yi Qianxian and his people was enough to match that of the Tianfeng Chu clan or the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. Everyone was stunned. What they didn't know was that this was not the full strength of Yi Qianxian and his people. If they knew the true strength of Yi Qianxian and his people, they would probably faint. Even so, someone was already on the verge of fainting. This person was none other than Chu Yuqing. Chapter 2662. When he saw the strength of Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others, Chu Yuqing's eyes rolled back, and he almost fainted. All of them were at the 9th level of the Human Martial Realm. It wasn't that the Tianfeng Chu clan didn't have such a card up their sleeves. However, this wasn't something that Chu Yuqing and the other top disciples could enjoy. Even Chu Lingfeng probably didn't have such qualifications. Who were these people? How could they have so many valiant guards? Chu Yuqing was so shocked that he almost fainted. Chu Qiankong and the others also broke out in a cold sweat. They hadn't expected that the mercenaries they had hired would have experts like Yi Qianxian and the others. Although the Tianfeng mercenary city was a mixed bag of good and bad people, the Tianfeng Chu clan had left so suddenly that they hadn't had time to screen out those who remained in the city. It was inevitable that some people would sneak into their mercenaries. However, they hadn't expected Yi Qianxian and the others to be as strong as they were. It was inconceivable that someone with such strength would appear in Mercenary City. While everyone was stunned, the Flying Star Lian clan members were also at a loss for words. When Yi Qianxian had said that the Flying Star Lian clan might not be able to protect Luo Qingtong, they'd thought that he was just boasting and had been about to reprimand him. However, now that he'd shown them his strength, they had nothing to say in response. Given the strength that Yi Qianxian and the others had displayed, unless they joined forces with the Tianfeng Chu clan, they definitely wouldn't be a match for them. As for Yi Qianren and the others, it was obvious that they were neutral. Compared to the Flying Star Lian clan, which had a conflict of interest with the Tianfeng Chu clan and wasn't familiar with Luo Qingtong, Yi Qianxian and the others, who were familiar with Luo Qingtong, were more suited to protect Luo Qingtong. As for the latter, he believed that they trusted them more. Lian Xingqian didn't say anything else. He nodded at Luo Qingtong and said in a low voice, "That's good too. With someone protecting Little Seventh, we can be at ease." His expression was calm, and there was nothing wrong with it. In fact, what he said was exactly what he was thinking. The reason why he wanted to bring Luo Qingtong to the Lian family of the Flying Star sector was that he was worried that Yi Qianxian and the others would be too exhausted to protect Luo Qingtong, which could lead to accidents in the upcoming danger. At that time, they would be in trouble. After all, Luo Qingtong's ability was indispensable to them. Now that Yi Qianxian and the others had revealed their strength, it proved that they had the qualifications to protect Luo Qingtong. Moreover, they were clearly neutral between the two parties. To be honest, Lian Xingqian was happy to see this. After all, Chu Lingfeng had a conflict with the other party before. Wasn't that the case? As the head of the Flying Star Lian clan, Lian Xingqian didn't want to see Luo Qingtong side with the Chu clan. Chu Yuqing and the others were bent on courting death, which was a good thing. But the remaining Chu Lingfeng was stubborn and straightforward and only cared about Luo Shaoqi. That would be troublesome. Fortunately, he had offended the man with the white jade mask. Luo Shaoqi was stuck in the middle and would probably choose not to side with either side. It seemed that the situation was in the Flying Star Lian clan's favor. With this thought in mind, Lian Xingqian smiled and did not say anything else. The group swept into the depths of the cave. The Dao spirits had already retreated to an unknown distance. Chapter 2663. They led the decaying spirit energy into the depths of the hole. None of the great Dao spirits that appeared before them could resist the invasion of the decaying spirit energy. If they couldn't escape into their vitality spirit energy, they would die. The people of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan worked together and easily killed them in the decaying spiritual qi. However, they had also consumed a lot of energy. Without the vitality spirit energy to replenish their strength, they couldn't use it. They could only rely on the spirit flowers and spirit herbs they had picked from outside to replenish their strength and strength. Among them, Chu Xiaofeng, Gu Yifeng, and the others were the most eye-catching. The top disciples naturally didn't lack spirit flowers and spirit herbs, and so did Xing Chun and the others. But for the ordinary disciples below, it was barely satisfactory. Some of them only had a few pitiful stalks of spirit flowers and spirit herbs. However, Chu Xiaofeng and the others were different. He and the other mercenaries took out a large number of spirit flowers and spirit herbs and poured them into their mouths without hesitation as soon as their strength was depleted. The Tianfeng Chu clan's ordinary disciples and the Flying Star Lian clan's people were stunned. They were all very careful and calculated the amount of spirit energy they absorbed from the spirit flowers and spirit herbs. They didn't dare to pour the spirit energy into their mouths until their strength was almost depleted. In contrast, Chu Xiaofeng and the others' actions were simply insane. Everyone deeply suspected that there was a treasure trove in the abandoned continent that was full of spirit flowers and spirit herbs and wasn't guarded by high-level magical beasts. Chu Xiaofeng and the others happened to have found such a treasure trove. Otherwise, how could they explain their crazy behavior? They didn't treat the spirit flowers and spirit herbs as spirit flowers and spirit herbs at all. One had to know that if they consumed the spirit flowers and spirit herbs too quickly, Chu Xiaofeng and the others might not be able to fight by the time they reached the heart of the continent. There was no way they didn't know this, right? Everyone was dumbfounded. Chu Jingyi originally wanted to remind Chu Xiaofeng and the others. However, he had only taken a step forward, and before he could speak, he heard Chu Xiaofeng say, "Oh, cousin, do you have a lot of spirit flowers and spirit herbs? I still have a lot here. Feel free to use them." As he spoke, he took out a bunch of spirit herbs and stuffed them into Chu Jingyi's hands. These spiritual grasses were naturally collected by Chu Xiaofeng and Luo Qingtong when they were setting up camp. They had stayed in the abandoned continent for so many days. In addition to the first few days, they needed to work on their cooperation. For the next few days, they cleared the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs nearby at a terrifying speed. Their madness could almost be described as plucking feathers from wild geese. The group had accumulated a lot of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. If he didn't use it now, when would he use it? One had to know that once one's strength was depleted, it would be very easy for one to be attacked and in danger if one did not replenish it in time. Those great Tao spirits were not completely killed. Instead, they disappeared. Who knew if they would pounce on them and kill them? Therefore, even though Chu Xiaofeng cherished the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs in his possession very much, he did not hesitate to use them. After all, his life was more important. As for Chu Jingyi, he had a very good relationship with him, and the latter had always protected him. Chapter 2664. Chu Jingyi held the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs with a dazed and complicated expression. Was he being taken care of by his little cousin who had been protecting him all this time? For some inexplicable reason, he felt as if his son had just grown up, didn't he? However, her little cousin had too many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Chu Jingyi watched Chu Xiaofeng take out a large number of spiritual flowers and spiritual herb from his storage ring and couldn't help but ask, "Little cousin, where did you get so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs?" Could it be that it was really as they thought? That they had found a treasured land with an abundance of spiritual flowers and spiritual grasses? However, just as he was thinking this, he heard Chu Xiaofeng say, "Of course it was Luo Shaoqi who helped us get it. Her observation skills are very good. Cousin, you don't know how great it was to deal with those magical beasts with her. Our spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs were so plentiful that my hands went numb." Chu Xiaofeng said with a proud face. He was secretly glad that he had chosen the Red Flame mercenary group. If not for this, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have been in his team. How could he have so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs for him to use? Looking at the envious and jealous gazes of the people around him, Chu Xiaofeng couldn't help but say his words loudly. Especially when facing Chu Yuqing and the others, he wanted them to hear him, so that they would know what they had missed. Since they dared to offend Luo Shaoqi, they deserved to be careful later. Chu Yuqing and the others' faces turned green when they heard this. Chu Chu Yufei, and the others were fine. They had gone to kill those 1,000 silkworms with Chu Xiaofeng and the others. Although they hadn't directly taken action, they had seen how Luo Qingtong dealt with those 1,000 silkworms. If Luo Qingtong always had such an ability, then it was no wonder she helped Chu Xiaofeng and the others get so many spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. After all, the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs they had snatched from Luo Qingtong and the others were obtained from the 1,000 silkworms territory. Although those were beast-luring grass, it also proved that Luo Qingtong had the opportunity and ability to obtain the same amount of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. As for Chu Yuqing, Chu Hanyu, and the others, their hearts were in a strange state. When they saw Chu Xiaofeng and the others using the spirit flowers and spirit herbs with all their might, they were secretly mocking them for their unrestrained usage. Once they reached the heart of the continent, they would be in for a miserable time. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiaofeng and the others would have so many spiritual flowers and herbs on them? They might even have more than they had on them. This made them feel like they had been slapped in the face. After all, who were Chu Xiaofeng and the others? They were just ordinary disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan, and even some mercenaries, but they had more spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs than the top disciples of the Tianfeng clan. Wouldn't they be suppressed by them? Chu Yuqing and the others had never felt so stifled before. They were proud of the fact that their cultivation resources were above everyone else's. At this moment, this capital was pressed down by Luo Qingtong. There was nothing more infuriating than this. However, because of Luo Qingtong's existence, they couldn't make Gu Yifeng and the others hand over their spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Otherwise, even if they couldn't touch Chu Xiaofeng's spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs, they could snatch Gu Yifeng's spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. What could these mercenaries do to them? Chapter 2665. But now, they could only grit their teeth and watch as Gu Yifeng and the others wantonly used those spirit flowers and herbs, while they couldn't even get a single strand of hair. How infuriating! Chu Yuqing gnashed his teeth inwardly. If he'd known earlier that this Luo Shaoqi was so useful and strange, he would have long ago brought her to his side. He would have squeezed her dry, then killed her. That way, he wouldn't have landed himself in such an embarrassing situation. At that time, she might not have the protection of that white jade masked man and Chu Lingfeng. Chu Yuqing was filled with resentment as he thought of this. He couldn't vent his anger on Luo Qingtong, so he turned to curse Chu Ke and Chu Yufei, blaming them for not warning him of Luo Qingtong's power. Why didn't you tell me that she had the ability to obtain such spirit flowers and herbs? His expression was cold and harsh, and he didn't listen to Chu Ke and Chu Yufei's explanations at all. He only wanted to teach them a lesson. He completely vented his anger on them. Chu Ke and Chu Yufei hadn't expected that they would be the unlucky ones in the end. Chu Yufei's gentle and charming figure and deep scheming were also useless at this moment. In his anger, Chu Yuqing couldn't be bothered to listen to her pretentious words. This was the fate of those who flaunted their beauty and were full of schemes. When a man was happy, he would treat you like a plaything and tease you whenever he wanted. When he was unhappy, who did you think you were? If Chu Yufei was the real first young miss of the Chu family, it would have been fine, but she wasn't. Chu Yuqing couldn't be bothered to give her any face. If it weren't for the Ninth Elder's faction and by Xing's strength and influence as Madame Xing, Chu Yuqing would have thrown her out of the group. Chu Yuqing and the others were causing a ruckus, but Luo Qingtong didn't notice at all. Her attention was completely focused on the depths of the cave in front of her. Perhaps it was because they were getting closer and closer to the depths, but the fog inside was getting thicker and thicker. The vitality and spiritual energy was becoming denser and denser. Luo Qingtong's bloodshot eyes made it difficult for her to see the scene inside. After all, it was the heart of the continent, which was filled with the power of the great Tao. Currently, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes were still unable to see through it, especially when they were so far apart. However, as everyone's journey progressed, Luo Qingtong felt a strong sense of danger in her heart. Everyone, be careful. Just as the sense of danger reached its peak, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes suddenly saw a huge black figure leaping out from the depths of the hole in front of them and rushing towards them. You're just exaggerating. Chu Yuqing's heart was filled with displeasure as he lectured Chu Ke and the others. When he heard Luo Qingtong's sudden shout, he jumped in fright. He then raised his head and looked into the depths of the cave. It was filled with smoke, and there was no movement at all. He immediately snorted with disdain. However, as soon as he said this, there was a swoosh and a furious roar. In an instant, huge figures leaped out from the depths of the smoke and fog. The extremely dense vitality and spiritual energy violently washed over them. Then, as these figures leapt out, it suddenly scattered in all directions, revealing a huge cave in front of them. Chapter 2666. The Heart of the Continent. At the top of the mountain in the huge cave, there was a huge ball of light that was pulsating violently, as if it was alive. Countless mountains, rivers, forests, and trees flashed quietly in it. Many of the people present were very familiar with these scenes. It was not because of anything else, but because it was the terrain of the abandoned continent. What was flashing in this ball of light was the scene of the abandoned continent. This was the heart of the continent, hidden deep in the ground of the abandoned continent. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in shock. They saw that the huge cave was a natural underground cave. Because it was separated from the ground, it had evolved into a different ecology and appearance. Trees, mountains, rivers, and everything else was there. When they looked up, they couldn't see the top at all. They didn't know how deep they were underground. The only thing they could be sure of was that they had reached the heart of the continent. While everyone's eyes were filled with surprise and shock, the roar of beasts and the sound of wind came from all directions. Everyone was shocked to realize that there was a terrible danger in front of them along with the cave. Roar! An extremely arrogant roar sounded, with a natural pressure of the great path. It was almost deafening as it rushed toward the crowd. In the next second, a guard at LV6 of a human martial realm who was standing on the periphery was pushed to the ground by an extremely huge figure. Then, in an instant, his body was torn into pieces by an irresistible force. Ah! A shrill scream rang out. He had broken through to the 6th level of the mortal chi layer and was responsible for the safety of the Chu clan. He was much stronger than an ordinary cultivator of the 6th level of the mortal chi layer. However, just like that, he had been killed by a pair of gigantic claws. Not only that, but in the next second his body was put into a huge mouth. Then, there was a crunching sound that made people's teeth ache. Countless spit and blood splattered. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood. This guard at LV6 of the human martial realm had died without a complete corpse. Spirit Beast. Looking at the mountainous beast in front of them and sensing the pressure of the great Tao emanating from it, the expressions of the people from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan instantly darkened. Spiritual beasts were separated from demonic beasts by a single word, and were also separated from demonic beasts by a single word. The meanings they represented were completely different. To put it simply, anything with the word spirit was naturally compatible with the power of the Great Path. They could borrow the power of the Great Path to cultivate on their own. Like humans, they could constantly improve and transform themselves. When a spirit beast cultivated to a high level, it could even possess the same power as a divine beast. However, spirit beasts were rare in this world. Not every demonic beast could comprehend the power of the Great Path and cultivate to transform themselves like humans. This required a certain amount of luck and comprehension of the Great Tao. However, at this moment, there were no less than 10 spiritual beasts in front of everyone. Furthermore, this was because this place was not spacious enough and could barely accommodate 10 spirit beasts. Otherwise, there would be more than 10 of them rushing in. Luo Qingtong could even hear the roars of beasts coming from the cave in front of them. Obviously, the number of spirit beasts here was no less than the Great Path spirits from before. Chapter 2667. Luo Qingtong's eyes were indescribably solemn as she watched the spirit beasts roaring and pouncing towards them. She shouted to everyone, "Quick, let's charge over!" The cave here was narrow and wouldn't be of any benefit to them in dealing with those spirit beasts. On the contrary, they had a large number of people and would be easily injured in the process. Their hands and feet would be tied, and they would be easily killed by these spirit beasts. Once the spirit beasts cut off their path of retreat, they would be trapped in a hole. In that case, they might as well charge towards the cave where the heart of the continent was located. At least, although there were many spirit beasts there, the place was spacious enough. They could gather together and hold them off for a while. After all, these spirit beasts were only at the human martial realm, just like the great Tao spirits from before. Otherwise, Luo Qingtong and the others wouldn't even have a chance to struggle. However, the appearance of these spirit beasts was just like the great Tao spirits from before. It was extremely inconceivable. Spirit beasts were very rare in this world, and it would be amazing if one could appear normally. However, there were so many of them here. Although their strength wasn't very tyrannical, it showed that this place was different from the rest. Thinking about the difference in the energy tide that she saw previously and the various abnormalities in this cave, Luo Qingtong couldn't help but wonder if this had something to do with the strange treasure that she had previously suspected. Was it because of the existence of that strange treasure that these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts appear in the group? While Luo Qingtong was thinking about this, everyone had already listened to her and rushed towards the cave ahead. Yi Qianxian and the others were at the front. In fact, before she spoke, Yi Qianxian saw the spirit beasts rushing into the cave and immediately led her, Beiqing, Fengyu, and the others to the entrance of the cave ahead. When he rose, Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, so the others were slower by a beat. Lian Xing and the others reacted quickly as well. Although the appearance of many spirit beasts surprised him, the appearance of the Great Path Spirit had given him a base. Therefore, even though he was surprised, he didn't hesitate to deal with it. Almost at the same time as Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, he also ordered the people of the Lian clan of the Flying Star Realm to follow Luo Qingtong and the others into the cave ahead. Amongst them, the most chaotic were the people from the Heavenly Wind Chu clan. As soon as Luo Qingtong's voice rang out, Chu Yuqing and the others immediately began to shriek. How can this be? There are more spirit beasts there. Is Luo Xiaoqi trying to get us all killed by making such a decision, so she can monopolize the Tian Luo grass in the heart of the continent? Chu Ku'er's voice was extremely sharp. Among everyone's voices, her voice was the sharpest and most hysterical. She had just been taught a lesson by Chu Yuqing, so her entire body was brimming with the desire to find trouble with someone and vent her viciousness. However, as soon as she spoke, she was despised by Chu Jingyi and the others. If that's what you think, then don't follow us later. Chapter 2668. Once we're surrounded by them, we'll have no choice but to surrender. These spirit beasts can continuously surround and kill us. Do you have the energy and strength to fight them in a war of attrition? Chu Xiaofeng's voice sounded disdainfully. You're really stupid. No wonder you caused the death of all the people around you. His words instantly poked Chu Ku'er's sore spot. She immediately flew into a rage and shouted, Shut up. You're just a dog under Luo Xiaoqi's feet. Chu Xiaofeng, you're a descendant of our Tianfeng Chu family. You do whatever Luo Xiaoqi says. Don't you have any shame? Even if we'll be exhausted to death by these spirit beasts here, won't it be the same once we enter the cave? There are even more spirit beasts inside. Chu Ku'er screamed as if she had gone crazy. Chu Xiaofeng looked at her as if he was looking at a lunatic. I'm too lazy to talk to you. Follow me if you want to. Besides, what's wrong with being a dog? If you had the ability to save our lives with just a word like Luo Xiaoqi, I would also be a dog under your feet. Unfortunately, you don't, Chu Xiaofeng said mockingly. He wasn't like Chu Jingyi, who had to worry about his demeanor as a top descendant and couldn't say many things. He just had to say it. He wanted to anger Chu Ku'er to death. Oh, right, if you want to say that listening to Luo Xiaoqi is like being a dog under her feet, it seems like you guys are too. After all, you listened to her and walked forward, didn't you? As Chu Xiaofeng said this, he immediately sneered and rushed forward with Chu Jingyi and the others. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention to Chu Ku'er. The latter's expression changed greatly. When she heard Chu Xiaofeng's last words, she hurriedly looked at Chu Yuqing beside her and said anxiously, Big brother, don't listen to his nonsense. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that listening to Luo Xiaoqi's word would make you a dog. Chu Ku'er's words became more and more anxious, and, in the end, she was a little incoherent. She had just been taught a lesson by Chu Yuqing, and now was the time to be afraid. Chu Yuqing's face darkened as he looked at his sister, who was incapable of accomplishing anything but good at ruining things. He couldn't help but slap her across the face. Then what do you mean? Idiot! With just one sentence, he scolded everyone present. Did she have a pig brain? Of all the things she could use to attack Luo Xiaoqi, she had to use the fact that Chu Xiaofeng listened to her. Stupid beyond compare. Chu Qiankong and the others also looked at Chu Ku with ice-cold gazes. No one would be happy to be called a dog under Luo Qingtong's feet. To a certain extent, they had listened to Luo Qingtong's words. If you don't have the ability, don't blame others for being stupid. Chu Ku, although there are more spirit beasts in that cave, there are also more places for us to hide and use. Moreover, the heart of the continent is there. Perhaps we can use the heart of the continent to avoid and eliminate these spirit beasts. It's better than being surrounded and killed by these spirit beasts. If you want to throw away your life here, we won't stop you. If you want to be stupid here, we won't stop you either. But don't take us with you. Chapter 2669. After Chu Qiankong said this, he leaped up with Chu Yuanhong and the others towards the entrance of the cave. Hearing his words, Chu Ku-er's face was filled with unspeakable shame and anger. She was originally very unconvinced, thinking that she had been framed by Chu Xiaofeng and that no one knew her painstaking efforts. Therefore, when she was slapped by Chu Yuqing, she wanted to cry and make a scene. She wanted to let everyone know that she had said the wrong thing for their own good. But now, when Chu Qiankong spoke, she didn't know what to say. All the words were stuck in her throat. Luo Shaoqi was actually right. Then why had she caused such a ruckus for so long? Wasn't that just a clown? Not only had she been beaten by Chu Yuqing, but she had also offended Chu Qiankong and the others. When Chu Ku thought of this, her face turned pale and red. It was extremely unsightly. Chu Tianming and the others also had the same expression. They had just been hooting, saying that Luo Qingtong wanted to kill them. But now, they didn't even dare to fart. As for Chu Yuqing, Chu Hanyu, and the others, their faces were gloomy as they led their own people to follow Chu Qiankong and the others. They had made them lose face this time, but they couldn't blame anyone else for this. They hadn't seen through Luo Shaoqi's intentions. If they really stayed here and didn't leave, then what awaited them was certain death. They couldn't even escape. Under the pursuit of those spirit beasts, without the help of Luo Qingtong, Chu Qiankong, and the Flying Star Lin family, they wouldn't be able to run far before those spirit beasts caught up to them. How could they dare to stay here any longer? The group rushed towards the entrance of the cave. The 10 spirit beasts that had rushed into the cave saw Luo Qingtong and the others rush towards the cave and immediately rushed to intercept them. If not for this, Chu Yuqing and the others would have been torn to shreds by those spirit beasts countless times over. Boom! Beiqing, Feng Yu, and the others worked together to blast away a spirit beast. Because they had already revealed the strength of the 9th level of the mortal martial realm, and they were fighting together, no one doubted that there was anything wrong with them being able to expel a spirit beast so quickly. On the Lin family's side, Lin Xingxin and the other top disciples of the Flying Star Lin family gathered together and used the Lin family's secret amplification technique. Together with the human martial realm experts around them, they also blasted a spirit beast away. Chu Lingfeng's side was the most shocking. His body was surrounded by an extremely powerful and terrifying force. The veins on his body were bulging as if they were about to explode. He hugged a spirit beast that was about to bite them and threw it away with a wave of his hand. Roar! As for the little snowball, it had been obediently staying by his side all this time. But this time, it let out a roar and charged out. With a flick of its fluffy tail, it tangled with another spirit beast that was charging at it. Then, under the other people's attacks, it fiercely bit off the head of the spirit beast. Since then, all 4 spirit beasts had fallen at the hands of Luo Qingtong and the others. With this, the passage leading to the cave was opened. Chapter 2670. When they were in the cave, the scene inside was even more shocking. It was as if this was a world that was no different from the abandoned continent on the surface. The only difference was that one was underground and the other was on the surface. Perhaps it had sensed the appearance of Luo Qingtong and the others, but the heart of the continent at the top of the mountain jumped even more violently. The mountains and rivers inside were constantly changing and moving. Luo Qingtong looked at the huge, jumping mass of light. She didn't know why, but she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if she had seen such a scene somewhere before. This sense of familiarity was exactly the same as when Luo Qingtong had seen the tide of power erupt from the heart of the continent. Luo Qingtong had also felt that it was very familiar, but because she couldn't grasp that fleeting feeling in her heart, she didn't think much about it. Now, this strange feeling came again. But before coming to the abandoned continent, Luo Qingtong had never been to any other continent, not to mention seeing the heart of the continent hidden in the Earth's core. Wait, as Luo Qingtong thought of this, her heart suddenly jumped. She looked at the violently jumping mass of light at the top of the mountain and finally knew where this strange sense of familiarity came from. She had never been to any other continent, but in the true Spill continent, she had seen such a jumping mass of light. Little dumpling, Luo Qingtong exclaimed in her heart, looking at this jumping mass of light. The more she looked, the more she felt that it was similar to when she had seen the little realm beast before it had hatched. But at that time, that little dumpling had been in an egg-shaped mass of light, and it was indeed an egg. In the end, the little realm beast had hatched. The shape of the heart of the continent was a scattered ball of light, like a cloud. The two gave off completely different feelings. But Luo Qingtong was sure that there must be some connection between the two. Could it be that the mass of light that had hatched the little realm beast was actually the heart of the true Spill continent? As Luo Qingtong was thinking, she suddenly heard a voice in her mind. Of course, the realm beast is the incarnation of the origin. It can transform into an existence of a world. The only place that can hatch it is the heart of the continent that contains the great Tao of the world. Otherwise, where would it hatch from? But that little dumpling from before was also strange. It is reasonable to say that a low-level heart of the continent wouldn't be used as a place to hatch a realm beast. I don't know how it ran in there. As soon as it said this, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows. This little Luo Qingtong, finally. Master, is it that one day without seeing me feels like 3 years? Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong's Luo, the power of the Great Path was extremely beneficial to it. At this moment, the power in its body had completely recovered. That's right. It said to Luo Qingtong, hurry up and put that little dumpling in the place where the power of the Great Tao is the strongest. This will be good for its recovery. That little guy was born in the heart of the continent. It can absorb a lot of the power of the origin from the power of the Great Tao. Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed. Chapter 2671. Little Pig was stunned by Luo Qingtong's words. If that's the case, then it can recover at least half of its strength. But that also depends on the level of the heart of the continent. Little Pig said, after all, if the level of the heart of the continent is too low, like the true Spill continent, then it's not necessarily the case. One had to know that Xiao Tuanzi had stayed in the land of the fallen immortals for a long time. It had barely accumulated enough strength to be born. It was basically impossible for Xiao Tuanzi to recover all of its strength, especially when the person Luo Qingtong had summoned almost sucked Xiao Tuanzi dry. That was even more impossible. Luo Qingtong nodded. She told Little Pig about her current location and the abandoned continent. Then she asked, if that's the case, how much can the heart of the continent help it recover? That's hard to say. Little Pig frowned and said with some hesitation, according to what you said, the heart of the continent shouldn't have any power of the Great Tao left. But it strangely gave birth to the Skynet grass, the Great Tao spirit, and the spirit of the Great Tao. It's certain that there's a treasure that's giving birth to it. Otherwise, it's impossible for such a situation to occur. If that's the case, I'm not sure how much power Xiao Tuanzi can absorb after it goes in. After all, according to the previous decline of the abandoned continent, Xiao Tuanzi shouldn't be able to absorb any power. Luo Qingtong immediately understood what Little Pig was trying to tell her. In other words, how much power Xiao Tuanzi can absorb depends on how much influence that treasure has on the heart of the continent. Luo Qingtong understood Little Pig's meaning. The heart of the continent didn't have any effect on Xiao Tuanzi. But because of that possible treasure, the heart of the continent might be useful for Xiao Tuanzi's recovery. But he wasn't sure if it would be effective or how effective it would be. This was in line with Luo Qingtong's previous conjecture. When she saw the eruption of power from the heart of the continent, she had already noticed that the situation here was abnormal. From the looks of it, that was indeed the case. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and quickly analyzed the current situation. But then, there was a problem. Did the Lin family of the Flying Star Planet and the Tianfeng Chu family, as the people who discovered the Tianluo grass here, know anything about the situation here? If they knew, the team they sent out was made up of the younger generation of the family. Moreover, he was a highly valued junior of Chu Lingfeng's family. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't seem to know about the situation here. If not for Luo Qingtong or Yi Qianxian, Chu Lingfeng, Lin Xingchen, and the others would have all died here. Moreover, based on the situation in the heart of the continent, the Tianfeng Chu family didn't seem to be able to easily enter the hole and leave. It was obvious that the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lin family of the Flying Star Planet were hiding something very important. And that was the discovery of the Tianluo grass. Chapter 2672. With that in mind, Luo Qingtong looked at Chu Jingyi and the others and asked, "Do you know what it was like when your family discovered the Skynet grass?" Chu Jingyi and the others froze when they heard Luo Qingtong's words. "Young Master Shaoqi, what do you mean?" Chu Jingyi looked hesitant, as if he couldn't understand what Luo Qingtong meant. Lin Xingchen, on the other hand, reacted quickly. When Luo Qingtong spoke, he spoke in a deep voice. "Our family members came back and said that they found the Skynet grass on this continent. It's very rare. They told us to be prepared. Prepare to compete with the Tianfeng Chu family. Because both families found the Skynet grass, we can only compete fairly. In order not to attract attention, this fair competition can only be between the younger generation." As he spoke, he looked sharply at Luo Qingtong. "Young Master Shaoqi, you should know that if it weren't for this excuse, our family members wouldn't have allowed us to come here and take the risk. The people of the Flying Star Lien family here were almost all the powerful juniors of the Flying Star Lien family. Lin Xingchen and the other top descendants were the cornerstones of the Lin family in the future. It was safe to say that if all of them died here, the Lin family of the Flying Star realm would suffer heavy losses. In the future, the Lin family would decline in the Flying Star field. It would take too much time and resources to cultivate another batch of powerful descendants. It would be impossible for them to compete with other families of the same level. Other families wouldn't wait for the Lin family's descendants to grow stronger. Therefore, the consequences were not something that the Lin family of the Flying Star sector could afford. That was why they had arranged so many guards around their juniors. The Tianfeng Chu family was the same. If it weren't for the safety of their juniors, they wouldn't have gone to Heaven Wind Mercenary City and hire mercenaries to protect them. In this way, the two families wouldn't have deliberately hidden the truth, because they wouldn't risk the safety of their juniors and the future of their families. Therefore, there were only two possibilities. First, the Chu and Lin families didn't know the true situation of the heart of the continent. The second possibility was that someone had deliberately misled them and had their people spread fake news so that the upper echelons of the Chu and Lin family would think that the situation here was nothing more than that. However, no matter what, it proved that the Chu clan and the Lin clan did not understand the situation here. Therefore, they no longer had a chance to contact the experts of the Chu and Lin families who were guarding outside. As expected, At Luo Qingtong's question, everyone activated the emergency communication tools they had with their families. This tool was given to them by their families so that they could notify their families for help when there was a change in the situation. Of course, the dangers during normal training didn't count it. Since they had all come here, their lives and deaths were up to fate. It was impossible for the family to come and save everyone if something happened to them. Even if something happened to Chu Lingfeng, it would still be the same. That was why Chu Yuqing had been so fearless when Chu Lingfeng had been surrounded and attacked. Chapter 2673. Besides, Chu Lingfeng was stubborn. Even if he was besieged and his family elders told him not to use it because of the dangers of the training, he would never use it. Generally, when they were used, there would be a huge change in the abandoned continent. At that time, the people of the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan, who were guarding outside, would enter this abandoned continent on a large scale and bring their disciples out. However, no matter how hard they tried to activate their communication devices, they couldn't get any response. It was as if they were throwing mud into the ocean. By now, the people from the Flying Star Lien clan and the Tianfeng Chu clan knew that something big must have happened when they came to the abandoned continent to train and obtain the Skynet grass. Their families wouldn't have sent them here, even though they knew that they were being sent to their deaths. It was obvious that they had been deceived in some way. It can't be the people who came to investigate the Skynet grass on the abandoned continent, Lien Xingxing said solemnly. That's right. It was impossible that both families had sent people to investigate. The two families were thousands of miles apart. They weren't even in the same galaxy. Who would target both families at the same time? That was impossible. Then there was only one possibility. The signs of the sky luo grass that the two families saw were incomplete. At that moment, the people from the Heavenly Wind Chu clan regained their senses. Chu Qiankong and the others said, "We know a little about the abandoned continent." The Heavenly Wind Chu clan was the first to discover the Heavenly Net Grass. Later, it was discovered by the Lien clan of the Flying Star Realm. Both sides sent the news back to their families. The people who discovered the Skynet grass were from our second elder's side. They were my uncle. He came back and told us that the Skynet grass was found on the abandoned continent. At the time, the heart of the continent was exposed. The people from the Tianfeng Chu clan and the Flying Star Lien clan were stunned when they heard Chu Qiankong's words. But now, the heart of the continent is clearly hidden deep underground. A disciple from the Flying Star Lien clan blurted out. That's right. The heart of the continent is currently hidden deep underground. But the heart of the continent changes every time. That doesn't mean anything. Chu Qiankong said. No, that's not right. Lien Xingchen narrowed his eyes. Even if the location of the heart of the continent is constantly changing, it shouldn't be exposed. Because that means the heart of the continent will be completely defenseless. If I'm not wrong, our two families didn't encounter any obstacles in the process of discovering the Tianluo grass. At that time, I thought it was because this was an abandoned continent and the heart of the continent was almost useless. That's why they didn't encounter any danger. I'm sure the clan thinks the same. But now it seems, Luo Qingtong interrupted him, something must have happened in the heart of the continent. It's very likely that it's the key to the birth of the heavenly net grass, the Tao spirit, and these spirit beasts. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she narrowed her eyes and looked at the spiritual beasts that were approaching them amidst the continuous howls. Chapter 2674. Some of them were hiding in caves in the mountains, while others were hiding in forests and rivers. Regardless of which one they were hiding in, all of them were converging towards Luo Qingtong's group from all directions. Their eyes were dark, and their claws were cold and sharp. Their saliva mixed with their low growls as they glared at Luo Qingtong's group. Behind them, the remaining 6 spirit beasts were chasing after Chu Yuqing and the rest of the group from the cave's entrance. The latter's group was in an extremely sorry state, because they had been a step too late. When Luo Qingtong's group had rushed out of the cave, Chu Yuqing's group hadn't made it in time and had been attacked by the remaining 6 spirit beasts. If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong's group had taken some time to kill the 4 spirit beasts, Chu Yuqing's group would have been killed. Not only that, but because the 4 spirit beasts had been killed, the 6 spirit beasts had slowed down in their pursuit of Chu Yuqing, giving them a chance to rush out of the cave. Chu Yuqing's group would have all died here. But even so, their losses weren't light. Almost half of the guards had been killed by the 6 spirit beasts. Chu Yuqing's group had scrambled out of the cave. When they reached Luo Qingtong's group, Chu Yuqing gave her a backhanded slap, almost sending her flying out of the group. "Slut, it's all your fault." At this moment, Chu Yuqing's face was dark with anger and hatred. If not for Chu Ku'er's group questioning Luo Qingtong's decision, they wouldn't have ended up in this state. Chu Yuqing had already forgotten that he had also questioned Luo Qingtong's decision. Otherwise, how could Chu Ku'er's words have influenced him? But Chu Yuqing wouldn't admit it. He would only push the blame onto Chu Ku'er, who told her to shout the loudest. How could Chu Yuqing admit his own incompetence? Naturally, she could only blame Chu Ku'er. Chu Ku'er had just escaped from the claws of those spirit beasts, but before she could even react, she was sent flying by Chu Yuqing's slap. She covered her face and didn't make a sound for a long time. She was so close to falling out of the team. How could this be? She looked blankly at Luo Qingtong, who was surrounded by people. Beside the latter were Chu Lingfeng, Lin Xingqian, and the white-masked man. He was just a weak young mercenary from God knows where. She didn't even have the strength of an exalt, but at this moment, under the contrast of the other party's lineup, she seemed to be the absolute center of the 2 groups. He was cherished by the leaders of the 2 teams, the young masters of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lin family of the Flying Star sector. She, the 3rd miss of the Tianfeng Chu family, was the one who should have enjoyed such treatment. However, she was treated like a stray dog. This is just what was going on. Chu Yufei stood not far from her, her hair disheveled. When she saw this scene, a trace of hatred and jealousy flashed across her face. The treatment Luo Xiaoqi was receiving right now was truly infuriating. Fortunately, she was a man. Otherwise, Chu Yufei and Chu Ku'er probably wouldn't have been able to bear such a blow. While their hearts were filled with hatred and jealousy, Luo Qingtong looked around at the scene and frowned. She was certain that something strange had happened in the heart of the continent. Chapter 2675. But no matter what it was at this moment, they could only rely on themselves. They looked at the spirit beasts that were constantly approaching them. In the distance, there were even sharper roars of beasts. And Luo Qingtong even saw that in the distance, in the places where the decaying spirit energy did not cover, there were faintly discernible, transparent figures that appeared and disappeared. Obviously, these were the spirits of the Great Path that had retreated before. At this moment, they were all gathered in this cave. It was also because of the decaying spirit energy lingering around Luo Qingtong and the others that they couldn't get close. And these decaying spirit energy were drawn in by Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others. No one knew what method they used. The decaying spirit energy was almost guided by them, passing through the places where the living spirit energy was pervasive. It didn't disperse for a long time, lingering around Luo Qingtong and the others. It was also because of the existence of these decaying spirit energy that Luo Qingtong and the others were so calm when they were walking in the cave, and the spirits of the Great Path didn't dare to disturb them. At this moment, after these spirit beasts appeared, the spirits of the Great Path appeared. Roar! The roars of the spirits of the Great Path and the spirit beasts rose and fell one after another, making everyone indescribably flustered. These 2 things could be said to complement each other and were completely a great weapon against people. The spirits of the Great Path almost ignored all attacks, and the spirit beasts were not afraid of the decaying spirit energy. Once these 2 attacked at the same time, the consequences would be unimaginable. The people of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Flying Star Lin family thought, and suddenly their faces became very ugly. Luo Qingtong's complexion was fine. She had Yi Qianxian by her side. If this man couldn't handle it, he would inevitably make a sound. At this moment, the man's hand tightly around her waist was steady and strong, without the slightest fluctuation in the posture of tightening. Thinking about it, he should be able to handle it. But even if Yi Qianxian could handle it, Luo Qingtong couldn't ignore Chu Lingfeng and the others. This man still didn't know her identity. If something happened, he would definitely only protect her. What about Chu Lingfeng, Gu Yifeng, and the others? Even if Luo Qingtong revealed her identity, at most, Yi Qianxian would be able to save Chu Lingfeng. Luo Qingtong wouldn't be able to let him take Gu Yifeng and the others away. Moreover, Luo Qingtong didn't know if this would worsen his injuries and worsen the damage to Yi Qianxian's meridians. Therefore, she would not ask Yi Qianxian to do this unless she had no other choice. But at the same time, she couldn't watch Gu Yifeng and the others die. When she was in the Red Flame mercenary group, he took care of her a lot. If it weren't for their care, she wouldn't have been able to live so smoothly in Heaven's Wind mercenary city. In the beginning, Chu Xiaofeng had kept her by his side because of Gu Yifeng and the others. She had received a lot of care from them, so she had to return the favor. If there was nothing she could do, it would be fine. Naturally, she would first protect herself and Chu Lingfeng. But now wasn't the time to be forced into such a situation. As Luo Qingtong thought this, her eyes suddenly became conflicted. If nothing unexpected happened, her identity wouldn't be able to be hidden anymore. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian didn't have the time to settle the score with her. Stop, what the hell? Chapter 2676. Luo Qingtong had planned to tell Yi Qianxian her identity at that time and appease him. Even if that man was angry, he wouldn't be too angry. Now, the appearance of these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts turned her thoughts into ashes. If her identity was exposed at this time, she could imagine how angry that man would be. No, she had to hold on as long as she could. While Luo Qingtong was struggling in her heart, Yi Qianxian could feel how tense the body of the person in his arms was, how guilty she looked, and how she kept peeking at him without looking sideways. Luo Qingtong probably didn't know that every time she faced him, she would look at him like this, although she did it every time without leaving any trace. But Yi Qianxian was used to being tricked by her. How could he not notice it? Even if he didn't notice it before, he had already been trained by her. Seeing her gaze, he immediately snorted coldly and didn't speak. He knew that this woman was worried that her identity would be exposed. After all, the appearance of these great Tao spirits and spirit beasts was not simple. Thinking of what he had sensed before, the tyrannical power that didn't seem to erupt from the heart of the continent of an abandoned continent at all, Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked at the heart of the continent. There was something in it. There is something in the heart of the continent, he said to Luo Qingtong in a deep voice. His voice was so low that only Luo Qingtong could hear it. It's a world within a world, and the Tianluo grass is also inside. If we seize the things inside, we may be able to make these spirit beasts and great Tao spirits listen to us, or retreat. Hearing Yi Qianxian's words, Luo Qingtong also nodded. That's right. Now, this was the only path they could take. However, although Luo Qingtong also saw through this, she didn't expect Yi Qianxian to tell her. Was Luo Xiaoqi's identity so pleasing to him? Or could it be that as long as it was related to her, this man would treat her differently? For some reason, Luo Qingtong's heart suddenly felt sweet and warm. This man was overbearing, narrow-minded, arrogant, and jealous. He also liked to control her. Every time he got angry, it was bigger than the sky. Although he was overbearing, he was willing to work hard to restrain himself for her. Although he was narrow-minded, he was willing to learn to be tolerant for her. He was childish because he loved her and jealous because he didn't want anyone to get close to her. He cared about her because he wanted her to be by his side at all times. Every time he got angry, He would be as angry as the sky, but he would never hurt her. His strength was tyrannical, and his prestige was unparalleled. Luo Qingtong was also a supreme king of the 24th century, so the pride in her heart was not inferior to his. However, she was willing to restrain the arrogance in her heart for him and learn to rely on and love him. Luo Qingtong had thought that she would never find someone who was willing to make her fall in love with him, who would make her restrain her domineering aura and bow her head to him. However, after meeting Yi Qianxian, she realized that all this was not so difficult. As long as you could meet a man who always cared about you, respected you, loved you, and let you override all his pride and principles, it would be enough. Yi Qianxian could break all his dignity and pride for her. Why couldn't she bow her head and act coquettishly for him? Men also needed a sense of security, especially Yi Qianxian, who was overbearing and narrow-minded. Luo Qingtong chuckled as she thought of this. In fact, she quite liked Yi Qianxian's appearance when he was nervous and angry about her, but couldn't do anything to her. This made her feel that she was cherished and cared for, especially when that man was flustered and exasperated. Well, she admitted that she was probably a fake wife. Chapter 2677. The heart of the continent had the most spirit beasts. There were almost layers upon layers of them, from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain. Powerful spirit beasts occupied every spot on the mountain. It was almost impossible to rush from where Luo Qingtong and the others were. In fact, it might even lead to a dead end. But after seeing Luo Qingtong's order, even though Chu Ke was gnashing her teeth in hatred, she didn't dare to say anything more. Since she didn't say anything, Chu Yuqing and the others naturally didn't refute Luo Qingtong's words. After all, it was because they hadn't listened to Luo Qingtong that they'd hesitated for a moment that they hadn't been able to walk out of the hole. At this moment, it was clear that Luo Qingtong was the leader of these two groups. If Chu Lingfeng and Lian Xingchen were willing to listen to Luo Qingtong, then there was no need to mention the white-masked man. In this way, practically all three groups listened to Luo Qingtong. Chu Yuqing and the others' objections weren't actually objections at all. In fact, it might even lead to their deaths. In that case, it was better to just follow the main group. Chu Yuqing and the others had almost been scared out of their wits by how they'd courted death. The expressions of the elite guards following them were extremely unfriendly. If they didn't listen to Luo Qingtong, they'd abandon them and leave with Luo Qingtong and the others. After all, they'd suffered far too many casualties protecting Chu Yuqing and the others. Even if they'd signed an agreement with the Tianfeng Chu clan, how could an agreement be more important than their lives? Every time Luo Qingtong made a decision, it seemed dangerous, but reality proved that she'd always been right. Moreover, she'd always led them out of danger. As a result, these elite guards wouldn't listen to Chu Yuqing and the others this time. Fortunately, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't continue to court death. Without their discordant voices, the atmosphere in the group was unusually harmonious and cohesive. Breaking out of the encirclement in the direction of the heart of the continent is indeed the best way, Lian Xingchen said in a deep voice. His judgment of the surrounding situation was not as detailed as Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, but this did not prevent him from seeing the basic situation. Their communication devices did not respond at all, which meant that it was impossible for them to be rescued by the experts of the Tianfeng Chu family and the Lian family of the Flying Star sector. But if he were to retreat through the hole, if this trick had worked, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have rushed in with them. Thus, they could only charge forward. The heart of the continent was their only hope. No matter how these Tao spirits and spirit beasts appeared, it had to be related to the heart of the continent. Their only chance of survival was there. There was nothing wrong with Luo Qingtong's decision. Besides, the spirit beasts were heavily guarded, and they even set up such tight defenses around the heart of the continent. No matter how one looked at it, the heart of the continent was their weak spot. Let's go, Lian Xingchen said in a deep voice. He waved the long sword in his hand, then gestured with his left hand. In an instant, countless streaks of starlight gathered in his left hand, condensing into a long sword that flickered with starlight. Condensing stars into swords was the Flying Star Lien clan's top cultivation technique. It was an important characteristic of the astral art, and it also possessed great destructive power. The long sword condensed by the stars have been nurtured by the disciples of the Lien family of the Flying Star sector with their own aura and strength for years. Chapter 2678. With the blood of the Flying Star Lien family's younger brothers, the battle power will increase by several times. The drawbacks are very obvious. Due to the blood condensation, the sword will be broken or damaged, and the foundation will be severely damaged. The realm will regress, and the damage will take a long time to recover. Therefore, unless there are special circumstances, the Flying Star Lien family will use this star sword. Enough to rush into Lu Lien stars, but how he uses this star sword. The Flying Star Lien family's younger brothers use this star sword in their bodies one after another. In an instant, starlight burst forth, and the brilliance of the stars shone brightly. The Flying Star Lien family's younger brothers hold two swords, and their eyes are cold. The Lien family star robe is shining. The Flying Star Lien family summons the Star Sword family's edge color is very serious. The Flying Star Lien family actually hides a powerful ultimate move. Everyone looks at each other. Qian Kong, Yuan Hong, Jing Yi, and the others all roar. In an instant, their bodies are swollen, and their veins are exposed. The veins are exposed, as if something is breaking through the skin. Boom, boom, boom. Pieces of armor-like things emerge from the bodies of the family's younger brothers, forming the appearance of armor. Flesh and blood armor. Family secret. Only the family's younger brothers can cultivate the hidden ultimate move. The attack and defense of the family's younger brothers are increased. Ordinary attacks can't penetrate the armor. There is no difference between the Dangua breaking armor field and the Flying Star Lien family's star sword breaking armor. If it is light, the realm will regress, and if it is heavy, the foundation will be damaged, and the method will continue to advance. Because they know that Lu Ji and the others are the key to survival, the family no longer dares to hide and transform into armor. Its Ling armor is the most shocking. The armor is completely black, and sharp bone spikes appear on the armor's arms and back and elbows. It's like a killing machine. The armor's luster is darker and shinier, as if it's real armor. It highlights the valiance of Ling's bloodline. After all, the armor condensed by he is simpler and cruder than the armor condensed by Yuan Hong, Yu Qing, and the other family's younger brothers. The family members condensed their armor, and the mercenaries and top-notch guards successively used their own ultimate moves. Chapter 2679. Let's go. Luo Qingtong's eyes slightly condensed. She took Fu Yuqing and other thousand silkworm silk thread, almost transparent silk thread jade, purity, forgetting how the silk thread failed to save the most. Luo Qingtong, Lingho Luo successfully made the move to retreat immediately. Giving her a reaction to succeed, this woman used the move to deal with the spirit beast, knowing that the spirit beast's keen sense of smell is extremely powerful. Only this spirit intelligence loses. Luo is afraid of repeating the same trick. Yuqing held back his sarcasm when his mouth was cut off. His eyes widened, seeing Luo Qingtong, silk thread fluttering, extremely afraid of speed and the slightest gap, flying around Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud, without any hindrance or trace. What's even more surprising is that Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud and surround the silk thread completely. It's simple. Gui Yuqing and other fruits are like Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud. Silk thread shroud, the circle shroud. The great doubt formed by the silk thread scattered the decaying spirits around the silk thread shroud. Don't let the spirit get close to the spirit beast for fear that the spirit will be killed. Luo Qingtong's silk thread shroud every surrounding body shroud, but circle shroud several circles due to the volume of the circle. The circles formed and offset each other, fanning out any decaying spirits. Only this silk thread passed through the team, actually touching anything. It's simply incredible. Luo Qingtong, how can control the silk thread touch? Knowing that Zhou Yangqi burst like a knife. Every Luo Qingtong silk thread shroud touch a bit. Immediately, the silk thread shroud tangled. Luo Qingtong forcefully juggling blade sits, as if she knows all about the situation and the strengths and weaknesses of the Zhou Yangqi burst. Yuqing's incredible scene is almost numb. The words stuck in his throat almost choked him to death. Ridicule. Ridicule. Ho Shun slaps his face. Luo is simply a monster. Ho Yuqing finally knew that Luo Qingtong saved Ling's shroud, Yin even more underestimate the enemy. She is indeed. Even if she let the prepared Luo Qingtong save Ling's shroud again, it's still easy. The youth is really afraid of the extreme. Chapter 2680. On the other hand, Yi Qianren looked at Luo Qingtong with raised eyebrows. She thought, this woman finally can't keep up the act? Let's see how long she can last. Your method of controlling the threads is rather peculiar, he said slowly to Luo Qingtong. Ha. Luo Qingtong laughed dryly. Naturally, she'd used her ice sorcery to achieve this. But if Luo Qingtong didn't say anything, no one would know. This was the best she could do. If it still didn't work, then she'd have no choice but to reveal her identity. At that time, this man wouldn't speak to her so gently. As Luo Qingtong thought this, the corners of her lips twitched. She could almost hear this man's exasperated roar. Luo Qi. She only hoped that this time, they'd be able to reach the heart of the continent smoothly. Mommy, please delay the exposure of my identity for a little while longer. Please don't come as fiercely as a storm. Luo Qingtong prayed in her heart. Fortunately, Yi Qianxian didn't say anything else after saying this. Whoosh! He hugged Luo Qingtong's waist tightly with both hands. With a flick of his sleeves, his entire body shot forward like an arrow. Boom! When he leaped up, the other members of the Lin family of the Flying Star Clan and the Chu family of the Heavenly Wind Clan all took action. Chu Yuqing, who'd been paying attention to Luo Qingtong's threads, realized that his understanding of Luo Qingtong was still far from the upper limit. The threads seemed to have a mind of their own, following their movements. Almost at the same time as their figures rushed forward, the threads all moved in response. It must be known that everyone's speed was different. Some were fast, some were slow, some were tall, some were short. Even the aura of power that burst forth from their bodies was different. This difference was something that even they themselves could not detect, let alone control. However, Luo Qingtong was able to detect their outburst of strength in advance, and take into account their speed and height. This was simply terrifying. The silk threads, controlled by Luo Qingtong, surrounded them like a protector, but didn't hinder their movements. They didn't need to worry about the existence of these threads at all. They didn't need to worry about disturbing the operation of these threads, which would limit their speed and attacks. Because those threads were like living creatures, they would automatically avoid them. Was this Luo Xiaoqi a demon or an immortal? Or a god? Chu Yuqing had never seen such an inconceivable thing before. In that instant, Luo Qingtong's move stunned him. It was the same for Chu Ku-er, Chu Yufei, and the others. They were also disdainful of Luo Qingtong's action of taking out the silk thread. It was only because they had been taught a lesson before that they didn't dare to speak again. However, the disdain and mockery in their hearts didn't lessen at all. They felt that Luo Qingtong's actions were nothing more than sensationalism. What kind of protection could her actions provide? However, at that moment, seeing Luo Qingtong skillfully taking everyone into her protection, their expressions finally changed. Luo Qingtong's actions could already be called a divine skill. Perhaps even the sky martial arts realm experts who could see through the changes of the world's origin energy wouldn't dare say that they could do what Luo Qingtong did. As for the Sky Martial Arts realm, what kind of valiant and unattainable strength and realm was that? Chu Ku-er, Chu Yufei, and the others simply couldn't imagine it. After all, the strongest person in their Tianfeng Chu clan, Clan Master Chu, was only comparable to the Earth martial arts realm. And this was because the power of his bloodline was strong, far surpassing that of ordinary cultivators. Chapter 2681. While Chu Yuqing, Chu Ku-er, and the others' expressions changed drastically, Luo Qingtong's team collided with the herd of spirit beasts in the direction of the heart of the continent. Those spirit beasts howled one after another and pounced on them. The Tianfeng Chu family immediately stepped forward under Chu Lingfeng's lead. Chu Lingfeng, who was covered in black armor, looked like a grim reaper from hell. With a wave of his hand, he blocked a huge spirit beast that leaped over. Then there were 2 more, 3 more, 4, 5 more. A total of 5 spirit beasts bit Chu Lingfeng in an instant. The other Tianfeng Chu family members were also bitten by 1 or 2 spirit beasts in an instant. However, Chu Lingfeng could not withstand as many spirit beasts as he could. Because he was standing at the front of the team, he was like the sharpest and heaviest knife that was inserted in the vanguard position. If those spirit beasts wanted to pounce on the Tianfeng Chu family members behind him, they could not avoid Chu Lingfeng. However, this would roar. With a furious roar, Chu Lingfeng's hands tore apart 2 spirit beasts. As for the other 2 spirit beasts that were biting onto his legs, they were also kicked away by him. The sharp bone spurs on his knees directly pierced the bellies of the 2 spirit beasts. The last spirit beast bit Chu Lingfeng's neck, but Chu Lingfeng hit it with his head. It fell to the ground with a whimper, and its skull was crushed by Chu Lingfeng's foot. Roar. Following Chu Lingfeng's roar, the other Tianfeng Chu family members also blocked the attacks of the spirit beasts in front of them. Then, with a whoosh, Lian Xingqian and the others' long swords were mixed with the swords in their left hands, and they attacked together. In an instant, the spirit beasts blocked by the Tianfeng Chu family members were all killed. While they were killing these spirit beasts, blood-red howls sounded one after another from behind them. Everyone's expressions changed slightly. Only then did they remember that they were not only facing spirit beasts from one direction. Spirit beasts from other directions were also urgently waiting to attack. And those were just ordinary disciples who might not be able to block them. Just as their expressions changed slightly, Yi Zichen's expression changed slightly. Roar. Mournful cries of spirit beasts suddenly rang out, followed by the sound of large amounts of blood and heavy objects falling to the ground. Everyone turned around and saw that in the originally unguarded area behind them, invisible threads mixed with blood were rapidly spinning in the air. It turned out that when they were attacking, Luo Qingtong had promptly retracted the protective threads in front of them and added them to the rear. The spirit beasts that were pouncing at the rear were all cut into pieces by these threads. In the other directions, Luo Qingtong's threads also achieved brilliant results. Her threads cooperated with the attacks of the ordinary disciples and the group of mercenaries to firmly guard the other directions, except where Lian Xingqian and the others were. Luo Qingtong's threads could be used to attack and defend. When the ordinary disciples attacked, she defended them and prevented the spirit beasts from getting close. When they recovered from their defense, she attacked. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.